toward unsuspecting shoppers, stood in the deli section rubbing cold cuts against his chest, or got right near cashiers' ears and began loudly singing Yankee Doodle.
In this particular trial, we had our subject, Kevin, take off his shirt, tape a banana to his forehead, and charge at various shoppers like he was a rhino. Within 20 minutes, store owners called the police and he was arrested, allowing us to come to the conclusion that this type of behavior is still considered at least somewhat taboo.
This is the Onion News Network.
Don't miss a moment of Free Talk Live. Get our archives daily via our podcast at feeds.freetalklive.com. Free Talk Live.
Hey, welcome to Free Talk Live. Phones are open here. If you want to join the show, you can do that. The number is 603-283-6160. That's 603-283-6160. Here in the studio tonight, it's Ian.
It's Bonnie.
And Aria.
Lots of things, of course, in the news to talk about. Coming up here tonight, we will get into leg lengthening. Apparently, people want to make themselves taller.
Which is surprising. You know, I know there are a lot of surgical options out there to make someone feel better about their body, but there were some things that I just assumed would be beyond the possibilities of current medical technology. Like, I'm a trans woman. For those who aren't listening already or may not be aware, my shoulders are broad. I would love some sort of, I wouldn't do it now. Having had surgeries in the past, I know it's not worth it, but I would love for there to exist some shoulder narrowing surgery, but I mean, such a thing as like redesigning your entire body. At that point, it's easier to grow a new body and have your brain transplanted into it. So I would just assume that shoulder narrowing surgery and leg lengthening surgeries and things like that just are beyond current medical technology, but that doesn't seem to be the case.
Apparently not.
Yeah, I thought the same thing before I read this article, that I just didn't think that that was possible.
As long as you're willing to, do some seriously invasive surgery, I mean, I guess things are possible. We can get into that coming up here in a little bit. But last week there was a story that I thought really was worth talking about, and one of these international stories of interest, and it's surprisingly uplifting considering where it's coming from, which is the so-called People's Republic of Communist China. And, of course, we did see some fairly good news coming out of China over the last several weeks, where there were major protests within the last couple of months there to go against the various different COVID restrictions. If you've been listening to the show, you know that China had what they called the quote-unquote zero COVID policy, and that's what led to Shanghai and other areas of China being locked down for months.
Weren't billions of people locked down? Or at least hundreds of millions?
Yeah, millions of people for sure. I mean, just Shanghai alone was 25 million.
Yeah.
It didn't work.
No.
Right.
Well, it didn't work because the numbers of COVID kept happening, despite the fact that they were literally throwing people into quarantine camps, building tremendously large quarantine camps. I mean, this is one of the scariest parts, is they have these quarantine camps now, and they are able to use them for whatever reason they want to. So
I thought the thing with China was that the camps they had constructed were like very temporary, very rough, very thrown together, and within 10 or 15 days.
That's weird though, because I've heard stories since way before COVID-19 was a thing. I don't know, in 2015 from conspiracy theory type places that were saying what is this ghost town that China's government just constructed in the middle of nowhere? Why did they create? Why
I know
are
you're
they
talking
just
about the cities,
the
full-size cities?
Yeah, a whole bunches of apartments, and it's
yeah, that was a really interesting thing. That was 7 or 8 years ago or something like that. It seems like now at this point.
Why didn't they just use those?
Well, why did the U.S. construct mock villages and towns and cities? It was to test weapons. I suspect the Chinese government had the same reasons.
Well, the cities that they were talking about, if I recall, because we did cover them here on Free Talk Live, it was just central planning to the extreme. So essentially, China built cities expecting that they could make them into something sort of without any natural growth.
Some bureaucrat in China just had never played The Sims before and was like, I'm going to play SimCity, but with real people.
It seems like that is the government excuse and the real reason would be more nefarious.
Could be. I don't know whatever became of those cities.
I wonder if
have
they
no
did
idea.
use them during COVID. Maybe we just didn't hear about it.
I don't know. Maybe they're still sitting there empty. I have no idea. But the cities weren't built like the COVID camps were for total monitoring, total lockdown. They literally just built cities expecting that, well, if you build it, they'll come, right? So like they figured they would turn these new
It worked for
properties.
Kevin Costner.
Which movie?
The one where they said if you build it, they will come. What was the name of that movie?
I don't know what that's from, actually.
Was it the baseball one?
Yeah. What?
Was that where that
Yeah.
quote came from?
If you build it, they will come back. I
Field
cannot
of
for the.
Dreams, I
That's
think.
it. Thank you.
I
Yes.
didn't
I've
see
never
it.
seen it.
So I don't
I
know
haven't
much
seen this
about
since I was like 4, maybe 5 years old. But yeah, that's definitely where that quote came from.
Well, it didn't work out, I don't think, for those cities. But that wasn't the story here. So, again, they had the COVID restrictions. They were the worst, at least that we were aware of, as far as worldwide. The Chinese COVID restrictions were the worst. We saw people jumping off their balconies from their apartment complexes, killing themselves. We saw...
If Americans are listening and don't know, wasn't lockdowns like we had, like,
No.
oh, you're not allowed to go to work and blah, blah, blah. It was like they welded shut the apartment complexes and people died, like from a fire starting and not being able to get out.
That happened more than once.
Things like that. And if you had to go to work, if you were essential, you couldn't go home. You could only go to work.
Some of these were so invasive and so extreme that they were using tamper-proof tape on people's refrigerators. And I don't remember the reasons why they did this, but they wanted to make sure that you hadn't opened your refrigerator or something. And
Yeah,
they
I
used
forget.
actual tamper-proof tape to ensure that you in your own apartment did not have the audacity to open your fridge.
And of course, they were going around with this chemical, whatever it was. I mean, I don't think they ever said what this stuff was, where they had these sprayers and they would just walk down city streets. There was footage of them in the back of a truck just driving through like the woods, just spraying this stuff.
And weren't the
So
people
weird.
spraying it wearing hazmat suits? Or am I
Yes.
misremembering? I thought so.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the
So you
white
definitely want to
suits.
breathe this stuff in that the people spraying are wearing hazmat
They were
suits.
spraying
for.
it right on people, too.
They were calling them the white guards, kind of like the red guards, but now they're the white guards. And so essentially they were police officers whose job it was to crack down on the people of China. And so we saw pushback. Finally, people after months and months and months of this. In fact, some cities had re-lockdowns happen, right? So Shanghai got locked down for like 3 months in the springtime this year. They finally got let out. And then more cities were locked down later on in the year. And some people said, you know what, this is enough. We're getting out into the streets. If we can get out of our apartment complex, we're going out into the streets. And they did. And they did in enough numbers to where the central Chinese government, who, many consider some of the most tyrannical, the most corrupt on the planet. Certainly, they get a lot of coverage because they're huge. There's obviously worse governments out there. We've talked about the economic freedom of the world index. China is definitely at the bottom quarter of the pack, but they're not like as lowly ranked as, say, Venezuela or whatever. So
China's the evil one that gets a pass, though.
well, I don't know if they get a pass, but they're big enough to where you hear more about what they do. And so we heard that Xi Jinping, the president, the current dictator president over there, decided to roll back the COVID restrictions. And so they no longer have a zero COVID policy. And the weird thing is, and we haven't covered this aspect of it, and I haven't even gotten to the fireworks ban, because that's what I really want to talk about, but just kind of recap what the year has been like, at least from the outside, right? We can only read stories from people who are reporting about what's going on in China. But he rolls back this COVID restriction, the zero COVID insanity. And there's this channel that I follow on Twitter called China Lockdown 2022, which has been one of those places they post the crazy, lockdown videos of all the stuff that some of the stuff we've been talking about. And strangely, the tune of China lockdown seems to have changed in recent weeks. They've changed to showing like footage and images of corpses. The suggestion being that there's this big blow up in COVID exposure and COVID deaths, like filling the hospitals, can't handle, like the morgues can't handle it. There's bodies in the streets kind of thing, like this crazy stuff like we never saw here. Like the media wanted you to think about was happening in the United States. They really wanted you to imagine that this was happening, but there really was no evidence. Like in the U.S., they would have those sort of temporary hospitals that they would set up, or the temporary outside areas.
They had one here at Keene.
Yeah, where like you could drive through and get a test, or drive through and whatever. And no one went to these things. Very few people actually utilized these in the United States. China, they literally have apparently bodies lined up in the streets. I mean,
they tried the same nonsense here in the United States as well, showing us, morgues that were just filled with bodies and trucks that were filled with rotting corpses. They did sort of try this in the United States, but it didn't seem to go anywhere. No one took it seriously.
Yeah, it didn't get any play. And so the weird thing is like this China lockdown channel seemed to be very anti-lockdown when I first started reading it, and now it's just constantly showing alleged evidence of massive COVID infections.
So they're just anti-Chinese government, and will post whatever they will just take whatever position makes the Chinese government look bad?
Yeah, I mean, that's one way you could see this, I suppose.
Or maybe they're just posting the things that are supposedly COVID deaths, but you're supposed to use your own critical thinking skills to imagine maybe there are other reasons for suddenly a bunch of people dying. They could have destroyed everyone's microbiomes, spraying some weird thing all over everything, and
maybe they're
people
just
didn't get enough sunlight.
Weak.
Yeah,
that's another good point, Bonnie, because maybe people's immune systems are so weak because they did lock down. The people in China,
for the better part of 2 years, right?
At least, yeah, especially with the zero COVID stuff in the last year. I mean, these people have been seriously more inside than anyone else in the United States has. That's for sure. It's
not just like a hippy dippy trendy word to say that your microbiome is destroyed, so you can't, your immune system is messed up. Because literally, your microbiome is more than your own cells as far as your immune system. Like the germs, quote unquote, that live in your intestine and the rest of the places they live in your body, they fight for your life more than any of you. Don't even have enough cells. If you didn't have any microbiome for an extended period of time, you would get a disease and you would probably die.
So being inside hurts that.
Yeah, and not exposing yourself to different people, different things, and also, if they sprayed some kind of disinfectant on everything, it would just be killing every germ it touched.
It reminds me of what Ron Paul said at the very beginning of in 2020 when this thing started happening, when COVID was really scaring people, and they were telling people to stay inside and don't have contact with people. And Ron Paul was saying that's the opposite of what you should be doing. You should be going outside. You should be getting sunlight. You should be interacting with people so your immune system stays strong. So maybe that's what's going on. There's not a lot of context with the footage or the imagery of people allegedly crowding into morgues, coffins, rows and rows of coffins, all kinds of
sounds extreme
imagery that seems really, really intense. And so they're not coming right out and saying bring back the lockdowns, but on the other hand, it's a lot of people would say that, right? See you guys got rid of the lockdowns and now everyone's dying. See, the lockdowns were working.
It's just why wouldn't it be happening everywhere else on the planet where it's not locked down anymore?
Well, they get all of their news from the Chinese government. So if the Chinese government told them that this was happening everywhere around the world, then that's what most of these people would believe.
So in the midst of all of this footage of the coffins, I started to see footage of people firing off fireworks.
Curious. Why are they celebrating?
Well, this is the thing. So it wasn't a celebration. It was a protest. And so they're saying fireworks is a protest. And I thought, oh, this is cool. Without knowing the details on what was actually going on, I'm seeing nighttime footage of people firing a ton of fireworks off into the air. There's footage of cars with mortars. People driving cars with other guys sitting standing out of sunroofs, holding on to big fire. I mean, this is China, right? They got no problem finding the best of the best epic level fireworks.
Well, aren't most of the fireworks used in the United States made in China?
That's my point. Yeah, that's my point, right?
Yeah.
There's a ton of fireworks in China and they're cheap. So they got these bomb mortars.
I think they invented fireworks, if not Japan or something.
Yeah.
Maybe China.
So they have humongous mortars that are firing off from moving cars. So
nice.
As cars are driving down the road, they're just shooting crazy fireworks out. I've never seen anything like this, right? Normally when you're doing fireworks, You set the mortar down, you light the
Run
thing,
away.
and you run the hell away.
Yeah, you don't want to typically do it in a moving vehicle.
Yeah,
Or holding on to it.
Holding the thing out a sunroof in a moving vehicle. Pretty wild stuff, right? And so I'm seeing the
They have more faith in Chinese craftsmanship than I do.
yeah. So I'm seeing this footage. I'm like, what is going on here? I just thought this was part of the anti-COVID thing. I just figured this was, the anti-COVID protests are still going, or the lockdown, anti-lockdown protests are still going on, and now they brought fireworks in just because why the hell not? Well, no. As it turns out, after they undid the COVID lockdown, they decided they would go ahead and, you need to have the police to do something.
I guess.
So apparently there's now a nationwide ban on fireworks in cities, according to Radio Free Asia.
This seems strange. Did they just arbitrarily do this?
I don't know what their reason was, but if you live in a city and you're in China, apparently it is illegal.
Maybe people started shooting off fireworks in celebration that the lockdowns were over and they wanted to squash that.
Could be.
I mean, that's just a speculation.
But the Chinese people are not in the mood to obey right now. And that is what I love to see happen with these folks. They are openly defying these fireworks bans to the point where literally there's footage of police cruisers like rolling up on the scene, right? Like the cops are actively enforcing this. People are getting targeted. They're being arrested for shooting off fireworks.
Seems excessive.
In cities. And so kudos to these guys. According to the story here, crowds in the central Chinese province of Henan attacked and overturned a police vehicle late Monday, not today, but this was last week, while social media posts showed residents in other cities setting off fireworks in defiance of the orders. Revelers on Hongdaiwan Square in Henan's Lui County, quote, deliberately vandalized a police car, causing chaos at the scene, said police in a statement on the standoff, which it said took place at around 11 p.m. local time. 6 people were arrested. Several video clips of the incident were uploaded to social media that showed people jumping onto a police car and another man in a Balenciaga jacket displaying the police car license plate that he'd ripped from the vehicle to the surrounding crowd.
I love it when governments around the world realize that it's not just democracies and republics that require the consent of the people. It doesn't matter how big your country is or how big your government is. If your people don't consent to it, there's not a whole lot you can do about it.
Yep.
If the Chinese people really want to revolt against the Chinese government's done. It doesn't matter how tyrannical they are, how oppressive they are. There's 1.5 billion of them. You're done.
It happened in Canada, too, with the trucker protests. They had to roll back a lot of COVID restrictions.
And they acted like, oh, no. This has nothing to do with the trucker protest.
We just wanted to do it.
Yeah, we were going to do it anyway.
Yeah, China was going to do it anyway.
Sure, yeah. You believe that, right? But no, that's definitely the big takeaway here is even the most tyrannical governments of the world still rely on the quote-unquote consent of the governed. Yep. If enough people refuse to go along with the program, if enough people refuse to be locked down, if enough people refuse to obey the fireworks ban, if enough people refuse, you fill in the blank, whatever the government prohibition, whatever the thing is, if people are willing to go to jail for the thing that is being prohibited, if enough of them are willing to, they cannot enforce it. They simply don't have the jails. Now, that said, China certainly does have more jail space now in the form of these quarantine camps. If they wanted to, they could lock up all these fireworks people.
They've been doing it to the Uyghur Muslims for years.
That's true. So it's not to say that they couldn't, but they also risk alienating even more people, right?
I mean, that's exactly it. If they have 1.5 billion population and they have 1 billion people or 500 million people protesting, which is more than they're ever going to get, but a third of their population, right? If they kill those 500 million or throw them in prison or whatever, they're just going to make very angry the other billion people. And if they do the worst and they kill 500 million people, they've got no one left to rule over.
Well, yeah, and you have no economy left, right?
Well, yeah, there's the
it's going to work.
There's the financial aspect of it, but the reality is that for a ruler to be a ruler, they have to have people to rule over. It does them no good to kill the entire population.
No.
And it seems like this would be obvious, right? But for some reason, it isn't.
The incident was sparked by police trying to enforce the fireworks ban, which led to some in the crowd to prevent the police cruiser, from leaving, and others to throw drinks and start smashing it before the most visible protesters jumped onto the car and removed its license plates.
You can get not allowed to ever go into Canada for that.
For
standing in front of a cop car.
You're referring to me?
Yeah.
It took me a minute to realize what you're referring to as well. Well, Ian didn't jump on the car and remove his
No,
license.
I didn't.
Although, that would have been funny. But
I would have probably been charged with a lot worse than
did not happen.
Vandalizing it.
obstructing government administration in that case. Later clip showed the police car overturned. According to the Twitter account, Mr. Lee is Not Your Teacher, which curates and reposts footage from incidents in mainland China to Twitter on the assumption they will be deleted or blocked by Chinese social media platforms. Jia Lingman, resident of Henan's provincial capital Zhengzhou, said fireworks have been banned until the Lunar New Year, which starts later this month. But there were
So it's a temporary ban?
I guess so.
Isn't it like January the 20th, the Lunar New Year?
Possibly, and this leads maybe some credence to Bonnie's theory that this may have been in relation to let's just stop people from celebrating the end of the COVID restrictions.
Yeah, instead they're going to let them celebrate, the Lunar New Year, which is customary for China, as I understand it, and Asia in general. But it's certainly not a case of, we want to make sure there are still fireworks for the New Year celebration. So we
There's plenty of fireworks.
Yeah, guys, don't hold off. It certainly wasn't that.
There have been plenty have been going off around the city on New Year's weekend. Quote, there have been sporadic fireworks going off in my neighborhood and the surrounding area. The ban will be lifted at some point during the Lunar New Year. Fireworks set off in defiance of the ban were also reported in other areas of the country. A political commentator said the fireworks were a deliberate act to defy the ban and came after people saw the government's response to the, quote, white paper, unquote, movement in late November against the strict antivirus measures. So, yes, they are saying here that one protest movement has led to the next. So,
this is how it happens.
Yeah, so people are being emboldened by their success, and they're taking to the streets more often. And that's a great thing.
It is, and the more successes they have, the more people will take to this. The more they go, oh, wait a minute, protest works. Okay, well, we're protesting this, we're protesting that.
And in a lot of cases, protests don't work, right? Like your one-off protests, the politicians generally don't care about. Like here in the United States, the old statement from the 1980s, there was this guy who worked for the Reagan administration. The name's not coming to me at the moment, but he was known for saying, let them protest so long as they pay their taxes.
Well, I mean, this is categorical in the United States. Look at all of the Black Lives Matter protests that happened in the last 10 years, and not a single thing changed anywhere.
Yeah.
And it's just because it was empty protesting, saying, oh, we're not happy, and that's it. There was never any plan. There was never any action. It was just a statement of unhappiness, and that doesn't change anything.
Yeah, and maybe
one thing I thought was so weird when I went to Black Lives Matter protests in San Antonio was like, well, first of all, I've told this on the air before. I literally got an invite. I don't know if it was like text or something, and I don't remember who it was from, that said, come to this thing. It's going to be an anti-cop protest and a vigil for George Floyd. And when I got there, everybody was talking about like nothing. Nobody was just like talking about anti-cop stuff that I wanted to talk about, But we were all walking, more people than I've ever seen at once, walking down the streets of San Antonio, and everybody started chanting, I can't breathe. Like, what is that really accomplishing? It seemed like me and my friend weren't doing it because it seemed creepy.
We're going to continue to look at why do some protests work and others don't, and more on the fireworks ban.
So the protection of life, liberty, and property is what the Free State Project is all about. But it's an effort to move 20,000 people who understand.
It's about demonstrating to the entire country
that, yeah, we can have a free market, a truly free market.
Making it just a freer, great place to live.
It's the world's largest voluntarist libertarian community, and it's only getting bigger.
That's amazing, to be able to move to a place where other people passionately believe in being free and independent.
What the Free State Project is managing to do, though, is to put their money where their mouth is. It's physically getting up across the country and saying, let's go someplace and let's demonstrate the power of these ideas. There's a lot of kind of philosophy that surrounds liberty. There's a lot of thinking about it and talking about it. But here in New Hampshire, people are doing it.
101 Reasons Liberty Lives in New Hampshire, a documentary by Free State Project Early Movers. Watch it free at 101reasonsfilm.com. 101reasonsfilm.com.
From Feature Story News in Washington, I'm Simon Marks. The leaders of the US, Mexico and Canada have roundly condemned the weekend's uprising in Brazil that saw supporters of former President Jair Bolsonaro occupy and vandalize government buildings in the capital, Brasilia. At least 1,200 people have been detained by the authorities. US National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan is traveling with President Biden in Mexico City.
There is absolutely no doubt about where President Biden of the United States stands on this assault on democracy, democratic institutions, and the peaceful transfer of power. The United States speaks clearly with one voice on this issue.
Mr. Bolsonaro, meanwhile, has been admitted to a hospital in Florida suffering from abdominal pain amid reports that he has taken advice in recent days from figures within former President Donald Trump's inner circle. Correspondent Ewan Marshall is in Sao Paulo.
He did speak up last night after the storming of Congress, suggesting that these kind of violent riots is not what he wants. He was kind of comparing them to left-wing protests, which, never actually could be compared with the extent of the damage that was committed last night.
The British government is block booking beds at the country's care homes in a bid to free up space in hospitals after NHS workers announced their planned industrial action is going ahead. Talks with the government ended on Monday without agreement. Sarah Gorton is with the Labour union Unite.
There was acknowledgement that there is an understanding from the Secretary of State of the trade union's position that resolution to the dispute is entirely possible on our side, but needs a firm commitment to boosting pay for this year, as well as a commitment to talks for the following pay year.
Meanwhile, 7,000 nurses in New York have taken to picket lines demanding higher pay and increased staff capacity. 2 major hospitals in New York City are affected. Russia and Ukraine are to discuss the possibility of prisoner exchanges when their respective human rights commissioners meet in Turkey. A Ukrainian news agency says Kyiv is expecting, quote, the return of our heroes and heroines. From FSN's bureau in Moscow, where he operates within the Kremlin's reporting restrictions, Stuart Smith with more.
Prisoner exchanges have happened before, most recently on Sunday. They usually include tens or hundreds of troops, usually one Russian for one Ukrainian. This meeting will be a rare example of direct communication between both countries, which may signal a bigger exchange is being looked into, or that the way they take place is up for discussion. Moscow's Human Rights Commissioner also commented on Monday about Russia's use of criminals to fight in Ukraine. She said that their release was all in accordance with the law, but is a state secret, meaning the details of the arrangement cannot be released. The first group of prisoners recruited to fight in Ukraine are now free in Russia, having completed their 6-month contract and with all criminal records cleared.
From bureaus worldwide, this is FSN.
We're still not sure why you'd want to watch, but our video feed is streaming nightly for free at cam.freetalklive.com.
It is Free Talk Live, and you can join the show here. The number is 603-283-6160. That's 603-283-6160. I remember when we were doing some what we called nightcaps here in Keene back in 2020, and I guess they also happened in 2021, but I was under house arrest at that point, so I couldn't attend most of them at that point. But in 2020, we went out and we violated the what they called in New Hampshire was not called a quote-unquote lockdown. It was the stay-at-home suggestion.
Yeah.
What did they call that? I thought it was an order. Stay-at-home order.
It was an executive order, certainly.
Yeah, there was an order that was written about it, but it had all kinds of loopholes and...
Yeah, the language was so weak in it that nothing we did was ever illegal. And we never got bothered by any cops. And
we did get tickets one night for parking on Central Square.
Right, yeah.
And whenever we challenged those tickets, they got dropped.
As tends to happen.
Yeah. And then there was one other ticketing that transpired, and that was when we were setting off fireworks in Central Square.
Well, when someone was setting off fireworks in Central Square.
Someone was. Maybe more than one someone, but
perhaps
someone got caught for it in that case.
Someone got charged with it for it.
Well, no, the police were sitting there watching it happen. That's why they got charged. But, we felt like we were pretty cool setting off fireworks in Central Square. But boy, do we have nothing on these Chinese guys that are out there. So I just showed you guys some of the footage that is on the China Lockdown 2022 channel over the last several days.
On what, Telegram?
That's on Twitter. China Locked, or it's their channel name is 2022_lockdown. If you want to see it for yourself, this is like epic level stuff.
It's
I mean, this
really
is
crazy.
Amazing to watch.
I wasn't there for the fireworks thing there in Keene, but I can't imagine it was anything as spectacular. One of the best fireworks shows I've seen was at Rogers Campground at Fork Fest.
Yeah.
But even that, which was paid for, it was set up by a guy who did this for a living. It had nothing on the spectacles that we're seeing in these videos on Twitter.
No, it's pretty impressive what they were doing here. So we're sharing about the fireworks ban in China and the fact that people are about sick and tired of all these restrictions in China. They protested the COVID restrictions, and now this last week they've been out in the streets protesting the fireworks ban. According to the story here at Radio Free Asia, that's rfa.org, emboldened by the ban here, the fireworks ban, political commentator Wang Jian said the fireworks were a deliberate act to defy the ban and came after people saw the government's response to the white paper movement in late November against strict antivirus measures. Quote, people across the country are violating the ban. Fireworks are banned in all cities, but are being set off everywhere. Spontaneous street protests across China in late November saw some people holding up blank sheets of printer paper and others repeating slogans calling for an end to the zero COVID policy. That's why they call it the white paper movement.
What did it represent? Why?
I'm not clear on that. It was just something that could be done, right? Like it's something that's easy to duplicate. Oh, just grab a sheet of paper and hold that up, and now you're part of our protest, right? Like you don't have to go buy some flag or whatever.
I guess, but it has to have some sort of meaning.
It probably does. I just am not aware of what that is. So, according to the story here, they were calling for an end to the zero COVID policy, which they got. And they got it in relative short order. And for Xi Jinping and the ruling Communist Party to step down and call elections, which they didn't get, while others held vigils for the victims of a lockdown fire in Xinjiang's regional capital, Urumqi. It's another revolution, said Wang, or at least passing on the torch lit by the white paper movement. The Chinese have learned that they can use protests to get what they want, which is a huge improvement on the way things were. So this comes back around to the discussion we were having before our bottom of the hour news break, and that is, what is the difference between a completely ineffective protest, which I would say 90+% of protests are ineffective at changing things. I've always said that, I support them as far as them being good networking occasions. You can get out there, you can meet people you've never met before, and then go, do other things together into the future. So I'm not going to say they're worthless, but as far as getting the government to behave differently, it seems like most of them, at least in the United States, are completely useless. And Bonnie, you were talking about the Black Lives Matter as an example of this. So
it was so many people, and it could have been, a lot bigger of a deal. But when I got there, it was just people basically saying that it was just like people saying, it was like kind of anti-white without anybody straight up saying it. Not anti-cops. Nobody was saying, it was just like, and I'm just getting that from some of the speakers. Like people just went up and started, stood on top of cars and started talking, and they just started saying like, oh, my whole life as a minority, it's time to stop being oppressed. And I was just like, okay, but it's like nobody is talking about the cops here.
They missed the message.
They missed the message, and it seemed like it got. I thought that it was like taken over and twisted, because that's not what it was advertised as. And then there's people chanting in the streets, "I can't breathe," and it just felt to me and my friend who talked about it later, it seemed like ineffective. Like, what was that doing? Like they were quoting like the last words or one of the last words of George Floyd, who had his neck stood on. It just doesn't seem. I don't know. I thought that there was.
It seemed very emotional, but not a good message. Not a clear message.
No one had like a direction, and it wasn't directed at the cops enough. My sign was the only one that said like, "Cops have no authority to rule over me," something like that.
Yeah, I agree with your interpretation, Bonnie, that it was taken over. And we saw that happen here in New Hampshire as well. And this can be one reason why protests in the United States have been such a failure, is that they are easily co-opted. And why that is, I don't know. Maybe it's because people are ultimately still too comfortable. And the people of China, they'd had it. They were starving. They're jumping out of their apartment complexes to their death because of these lockdowns. People are dying. Animals are dying in the streets because they're not being taken care of. Things like that. So maybe people are just that upset and that dedicated to continue doing what they're doing. Whereas
and
in
it's
the
just
U.S.,
obvious what the enemy is. Here
China,
it's like
yeah.
less obvious because there was all this stuff that started getting put out on Instagram around the Black Lives Matter times. It was just like all white people are the problem. It's like, yeah, there's any race of people can be cops.
I mean, you're absolutely right. There is a bit of a misdirection going on in the United States entirely, and Black Lives Matter as an idea sort of represents that. The problem isn't that police kill black people. The problem is, and has always been, that police kill people, and they're unaccountable as they do it. And by focusing on this narrow segment of the population that's killed by police officers, yes, too many people killed by police officers are black, but there are too many people getting killed by police officers, period. So if we fix that problem, then we'll also, by default, fix the problem of them killing black people.
And you could have roped in so many more people if you'd had that message. So to the point of what you were saying about the co-opting, we saw it happen in 2011 with Occupy Wall Street. And one of the things Occupy Wall Street had was the longevity. They had something that wasn't just an overnight thing. Oh, we're going to be here one day, we're going to protest, and then we're going to go home. It was there for many, many days. In fact, I don't even remember. I feel like it was weeks, if not months.
Yeah, trust fund babies who lived off Starbucks for 3 weeks in Central Square, living on mommy and daddy's money.
But it wasn't long before the politicians showed up and started to act like they were always there. Same thing happened with the Tea Party, which was sort of the right-wing alternative or the right-wing answer to Occupy. It kind of happened at around the same time or shortly thereafter.
Yeah, wasn't like Ron Paul one of the primary catalysts in the creation of the Tea Party?
As I understand, he does get some credit for that. I'm not sure whether or not he did anything about it, but yeah, he's definitely his name gets mentioned along with it. But once you showed up to the Tea Party after a little while, it became quite clear that this was an event that was just designed to publicize Republican politicians. And then you had all these coattail riders. There was this group of Republican politicians who called themselves "quote unquote" Ron Paul Republicans. So they were hitching their name to Ron Paul. This is, of course, right around the time when Ron Paul was running for president in 2012 for the last time. So
yeah, Michelle Bachmann and those types who sort of took over the Tea Party and sort of... It was very weird watching all of this happen as someone who wasn't terribly politically active at the time, but who was watching from the sidelines. It was very bizarre watching, like, Michelle Bachmann, one of them... In one of the presidential interviews, they asked Ron Paul, Michelle Bachmann is now heading up the Tea Party that you helped found or whatever. Do you feel like she's eclipsed you? And he's like, what kind of question is that? Is she up here? No, I'm up here running for president. Clearly, Michelle Bachmann. Yeah, just she was one of these Glenn Beck Republicans. That's how I think of her, who created this large, that crazy meme with the guy smoking a cigarette with tacks in the wall behind him and strings connecting them, finding... This is connected to that, and that's connected to that. And that's Michelle Bachmann, except she does that, and everyone's ultimately linked to Al Qaeda, or Al Qaeda, whatever. And she's got these large diagrams showing how Barack Obama was linked to Al Qaeda. Just completely crazy Glenn Beck style conspiracy lunatic.
Yeah, I haven't heard her name for 10 years.
Glenn Beck is like boring, dumb conspiracy. I like David Icke type crazy conspiracy theorist.
So they took over Occupy Wall Street. They took over the Tea Party. And then in 2020, they did the same thing with Black Lives Matter. And we saw it happen here in New Hampshire because I went to Keene Black Lives Matter, I went to Manchester Black Lives Matter, and I went to Nashville Black Lives Matter events. Nobody and I, our co-host Nobody, went together to these events. And, I did the best I could to document what was going on. I had my video camera and just wanted to see what people were saying. The Keene one was pretty good. It was organized locally by a guy who actually some of us know, somebody who actually came out to one of our nightcap events. He's a lefty in town, but
he's a nice guy.
He's somebody who is definitely not in favor of police violence and police militarization and things like that. And the speakers at Keene, which was the biggest rally I'd ever seen in Little Keene, New Hampshire, Central Square, bigger than the 420s. A decade ago, like hundreds of people were in this little relatively small park. And so the speakers there were all very clearly anti-police power. And that was what the message was. And it was really good. I really appreciated it. In Manchester, it was pretty good. It was a larger event. Obviously, Manchester's a bigger city. The speakers weren't as good as I thought they were in Keene, but they were still largely anti-police. They didn't go to a racist place there or anything like that. And then what happened in Nashua, they went to a big park in Nashua, and they had like a stage, because everything else was just kind of in a park, somebody with a megaphone, or like a PA system that they brought in. But in Nashua, they had like the government park where they had permission to be on the stage. And like that was kind of suspicious. And then they started talking. And the people they had talking at this one weren't just people who'd been abused or by the system, or they knew somebody who their brother or whatever had been killed by the cops, or what you might have seen at the previous ones. This was like city councilor, the mayor of Nashua.
People whose opinions I don't care about.
People who control the cops and tell the cops to arrest peaceful people every day.
Yeah, a state senator, a state representative. The police chief himself was speaking at this event. And I said, you know what? This has jumped the shark. This thing is over. They have completely co-opted Black Lives Matter in New Hampshire at this point. And that was the end of it. That was the end.
It sort of was, but I seem to recall not long after that there was an additional Black Lives Matter protest in Keene, spearheaded by someone completely different, and they marched up and down Main Street with police escorts.
Oh, yeah.
Wow. I'd forgotten about this. I happened to be on Main Street at my job at the time.
You saw it happening.
And I saw this happening, and it just seemed so counter to everything the anti-police movement were supposed to be. Because don't get it twisted, people. Black Lives Matter is and has always been an anti-police abuse movement. It's been co-opted by there's
some commies that are running the organization, but that's different from the movement, right?
And there's people out there who weaponize it in bad directions to take it to a racist place and stuff like that. But at its heart, it's a police accountability movement. For that movement to work so closely with the police in their protest, it's just not right. So that first protest, that was the organic grassroots one that we saw here in Keene. And then after that, I don't know, the moneyed interests came in. I don't know who is responsible for doing this sort of thing, but some outside factors, outside influence came in and changed the nature of the protest.
Sure did. So that's another great example of how the takeover happens. And this is, I think, why U.S. protests never have the staying power, like the Canadian truckers, like the folks in China that are protesting there right now, where they got what they wanted. The Canadian truckers got to roll back in they may not have gotten everything they wanted, right? Like the Chinese people wanted to have Xi Jinping step down, right? Okay, you didn't do that. The Communist Party didn't say goodbye, but they did undo the COVID restrictions. So they got something.
It's because in the United States, the media is so controlled and in lockstep with everything the government wants them to say.
But that's true in China. The Chinese media is state-run.
Yeah, but at this point, they realize who the enemy is, and they're not going to listen to that openly government-operated media. They're past a pushing point. But here it's like more hidden. The common person doesn't even know about the Twitter files and things like that. Maybe not the common person, but I would say like more people don't know about, media corruption than do, or care. They just don't care.
Sure, or media appears to be independent in the United States when it in fact is not.
If some really good protests started out and then they hear on the news, oh, this is just racist supremacists, then those people are going to be like, oh, I'm not interested in that anymore just because they heard it on the news. Maybe in China, they're just not caring what the news says anymore because they're like, that's what the government says.
My loose hypothesis, having just come up with this, I don't know if it's true or not, and I haven't put a great deal of thought into it, is the reality that the United States has been a quote, democracy longer than most other countries have even existed. Well, have been democracy, certainly, but the United States has been accountable to the concept of protests since it was founded. So it has learned, it's got 2 centuries plus of history of how to deal with protests and completely neuter them to keep them from being effective. Because that's what the government wants. They don't care if you protest, as long as they have a way to keep it from having any sort of impact. And I suspect the United States government, the shadowy figure behind it, they have figured out how to control protests.
And we have the CIA and FBI that could just throw some a person into a crowd and make them, change what the protest is about from the inside. I wonder if, I don't know, just China have the same type of stuff?
They probably will in 200 years.
Yeah.
Well, the concept of protest is probably relatively new to China and the Chinese government.
That's a good point. I mean, the last time, and the last time they really had a big protest there was Tiananmen Square in the late 1980s. Was it 1989 or 1988, something like that? And of course, they've erased all memory of Tiananmen Square within China. You're not allowed to talk about it. You're not allowed to do a Google search of it. And they were saying that these what they call the white paper movement protests, the anti-COVID lockdown movement, were the largest protests since Tiananmen Square. So yeah, it may have been 35, 33 years since they actually had a significant protest movement there.
You make another really good point. Maybe it's just desensitized for Americans. I mean, Americans protest every damn little thing. Americans have been protesting for the better part of 200 years.
Oh, you don't like a drag show? Go protest.
Yeah, they protest constantly. So when the American government sees a protest, they're like, oh, they're at it again.
Ho-hum.
Yeah, well, and the sun rose today.
Yeah.
So maybe in China that doesn't happen. So they see a protest and go, oh, crap. But the American government's like, yep. We saw what are you protesting this time? Okay, that one-ply toilet paper. Okay, yesterday it was this other thing.
That's a good theory. So here's a little bit more from Radio Free Asia about what has morphed from a anti-lockdown protest, successful, into now an anti-fireworks ban protest. So there's a fireworks ban in Chinese cities, at least through the Chinese New Year. In another clip posted to Twitter by constitutional scholar Zhang Lefan, a young woman is shown setting off rockets using a launch tube in the northern port city of Tianjin. Quote, the police came to stop them, but they didn't listen, and everyone set them off, he commented. So are you going to do anything? Reads the text added to the video. No, because you can't do anything. There are fireworks going off everywhere, and I think that's an intent. They're saying that to the government, right?
Wow.
Like they're saying, we have so many people doing this, you don't have enough cops to stop us.
That's so cool.
Henan current affairs commentator Li Fatian said Henan is part of China that likes traditional celebrations, and we're likely letting off steam after 3 years of rolling lockdowns, mass tracking, and compulsory testing under Communist Party leader Xi Jinping's zero COVID policy. Quote, zero COVID went on for 3 years, so it's pretty clear that the lockdowns across the country, large-scale unemployment, and the inhumane enforcement methods of recent years have caused a lot of anxiety and shortness of temper. He said further, there's a lot of hostility in society. He also said that
directed at the government that caused this, man.
In the right place. Yeah. That's what they're
3
doing.
years of, these COVID lockdowns, that's insane.
He said further, now the government suddenly removes all restrictions, and people still fear dying from this virus, so maybe they need to do this as a way of venting, he said, adding that more protests are likely in the coming year. He says, we've reached what you might call...
to say that because people are afraid of getting COVID without zero COVID policies that they're protesting? Because that seems like a silly spin.
Wait, say that again?
Is he trying to say, just read the last sentence again, is he trying to say, oh, people are protesting with these fireworks because, well, there's no more zero COVID and people are getting COVID, so they're mad about that, they're venting about that?
I think some of them are probably still afraid. I mean, if you look at the propaganda going on now with all of the people dying allegedly from COVID now in China, who knows whether that's true or not.
My point is just this reporter or whatever seems to be trying to say that that's why they're doing the fireworks, and it just doesn't seem likely to me.
Well, if they were I agree. If they were terrified of COVID-19 and the possibility
they wouldn't be outside,
right?
Banging around.
They wouldn't be around.
And why would they be doing anything to fly in the face of the government? They'd be like, people need to listen to the government, something like that. Seems.
He said we've
backwards.
reached what you might call a tipping point. In Nanjing, people let fly balloons in the eastern city of Nanjing on New Year's Eve, where a large crowd gathered around the bronze statue of the 1911 revolutionary leader Sun Yat-sen to release balloons in honor of his memory. I'm not sure why they're telling us about balloons in this story, but that's basically that. Oh, somebody else says there's a sea change in people's hearts with this commemoration. When the Chinese Communist Party can no longer guarantee that everyone's life will improve nor guarantee a livelihood to many people, then people will start to challenge it, because what right does it have to remove your political rights? He said further, the Communist Party has broken the social contract, so they don't have to obey it anymore.
Nice.
Now, of course, we all know there is no such thing as a social contract. It's a bunch of malarkey.
Yeah, but if they have a social contract that requires their government to uphold part of an agreement, I could see with that. Like the U.S. Constitution.
You they don't have a social contract.
No.
That doesn't exist.
Sadly.
No chance.
I think she means like if they believe that they have a social contract, the government's going to take care of us. That's why we have communism. And then the government's not doing the thing that they're supposed to do because communism is supposed to give everyone free, blah, blah, blah.
And now you don't have a job.
And now you don't even have that. Yeah. Then they're going to start to wake up to the idea that, wait, these people aren't doing their end of what they're supposed to be doing. Why do we have to listen to them?
I mean, that's sort of what we have in the United States with the non-existent social contract, right? It's people who, the police have an obligation to come out and help and support. The other night at my job, one of my coworkers said something, you should have sued the city of whatever city they were talking about for what their police said they failed to interfere, they failed to do something. It was one of those things where I can imagine, 20-year-old me saying, yeah, the police absolutely should have helped. They should have done something. And this guy was like, yeah, this person should have sued the city for that. And me now, I know the police had absolutely no obligation to do anything about it. There's no lawsuit there because the police, this entire apparatus that we have built up here, the United States government isn't upholding its side of the agreement, and Americans are completely delusional about it. So even if they believe in this social contract, they're not recognizing the reality that the American government hasn't been upholding its part of the social contract in ever.
Let's go to the phones here. Caller, you're on the air on Free Talk Live. What's your name?
Hey, guys. This is Ryan Summers.
Ryan, you're on the air. What's on your mind tonight?
Hey, well, I'm about to drop, I don't know if you guys remember, I'm the one that had the altercation with Trump with the banana peel that I called you guys about a year ago.
You're going to have to refresh us on that one. What happened with the banana peel and Trump?
Well, that was a long time ago, about a year and a half ago. I actually don't think any of you were working. But I just found the evidence that puts all of the Epstein Maxwell Ranch people from my high school, Valley High School in Albuquerque, New Mexico, all together with Donald Trump, mostly Ivana Trump, and Jared Kushner were at this party.
All right, 96. Ryan, I want you to tell us more about this, but hang on, okay? We're going to continue with your call here in just a few moments. And then we've got an update on the Chinese fireworks ban situation. So we just gave you the details on the fact that there's a ban on Chinese fireworks, setting them off within cities across the country. But after massive protests were happening over the last week, guess what? Some cities, not all of them, have now lifted the fireworks bans. So this protest already is bearing fruit after just 1 week. There's more coming up here in moments. It is Free Talk Live.
Are you making sense to the boomer mindset? I'm Holland Cook from survivalspeech.com. 80 million baby boomers comprise 25% of the population and control most of the USA's wealth. As aging parents pass on, they'll control more. Boomers are 46 to 65 years old and regard themselves as midlife. They identify as neither young nor old. They're post-minivan and pre-retirement, and they don't like being called boomers. They think me. Many of the purchases boomer couples make are individual purposes. They've been experimenters all their lives. If you want their attention, tell stories and keep it simple. If something seems complicated, boomers can dismiss it as, I don't need this. And if you're looking for work, you may be applying to a boomer, so relate accordingly. From survivalspeech.com, I'm Holland Cook.
There are basically two types of advertising, direct response and branding. Radio's great for direct response with its low cost to listener ratio, but audio can't be beat for branding, which is a longer-term endeavor. You want to be the first thing that someone thinks of when they think about your product or service. If you have a local business that you want kept top of mind in your community, call the station. If you need national reach, Free Talk Live's got around 200 radio stations, millions of monthly listening sessions, can suit all budgets, and if we don't think we're right for you, we'll tell you. Email me, mark@freetalklive.com.
Tired of cancel culture? Sick of mega tech corporations holding an axe over your head? Join the LRN.FM Matrix chat server. It's self-hosted, so no one else can tell us what to do or say. Don't like the existing channels? You can make your own. You can even connect into some of our channels from other Matrix servers. It's federated. For the full LRN.FM Matrix experience, though, you should join our server via the step-by-step instructions at chat.lrn.fm. chat.lrn.fm.
You're listening to the live edition of Free Talk Live. Hour number 2 is next after the news here on the Liberty Radio Network at LRN.FM.
From Feature Story News in Washington, I'm Simon Marks. The leaders of the US, Mexico and Canada have roundly condemned the weekend's uprising in Brazil that saw supporters of former President Jair Bolsonaro occupy and vandalize government buildings in the capital, Brasilia. At least 1,200 people have been detained by the authorities. US National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan is traveling with President Biden in Mexico City.
There is absolutely no doubt about where President Biden of the United States stands on this assault on democracy, democratic institutions, and the peaceful transfer of power. The United States speaks clearly with one voice on this issue.
Mr. Bolsonaro, meanwhile, has been admitted to a hospital in Florida suffering from abdominal pain amid reports that he has taken advice in recent days from figures within former President Donald Trump's inner circle. Correspondent Ewan Marshall is in Sao Paulo.
He did speak up last night after the storming of Congress, suggesting that these kind of violent riots is not what he wants. He was kind of comparing them to left-wing protests, which never actually could be compared with the extent of the damage that was committed last night.
The British government is block booking beds at the country's care homes in a bid to free up space in hospitals after NHS workers announced their planned industrial action is going ahead. Talks with the government ended on Monday without agreement. Sarah Gorton is with the Labour union Unite.
There was acknowledgement that there is an understanding from the Secretary of State of the trade union's position that resolution to the dispute is entirely possible on our side, but needs a firm commitment to boosting pay for this year, as well as a commitment to talks for the following pay year.
Meanwhile, 7,000 nurses in New York have taken to picket lines demanding higher pay and increased staff capacity. 2 major hospitals in New York City are affected. Russia and Ukraine are to discuss the possibility of prisoner exchanges when their respective human rights commissioners meet in Turkey. A Ukrainian news agency says Kyiv is expecting, quote, the return of our heroes and heroines. From FSN's bureau in Moscow, where he operates within the Kremlin's reporting restrictions, Stuart Smith with more.
Prisoner exchanges have happened before, most recently on Sunday. They usually include tens or hundreds of troops, usually one Russian for one Ukrainian. This meeting will be a rare example of direct communication between both countries, which may signal a bigger exchange is being looked into, or that the way they take place is up for discussion. Moscow's Human Rights Commissioner also commented on Monday about Russia's use of criminals to fight in Ukraine. She said that their release was all in accordance with the law, but is a state secret, meaning the details of the arrangement cannot be released. The first group of prisoners recruited to fight in Ukraine are now free in Russia, having completed their 6-month contract and with all criminal records cleared.
From bureaus worldwide, this is FSN. With FSN Spotlight, I'm Simon Marks. Today, the new year in Iran. It has begun with the regime executing 2 more men in connection with the country's ongoing protests, one of them a national karate champion. The uprising against the government shows no sign of abating nearly 4 months after it began, and some observers say they're witnessing a growing desperation on the part of the Iranian government. Nazanin Ansari is the managing editor of Kayan London, a weekly Persian language newspaper critical of the authorities in Tehran.
Even in Mashhad and in the airports, we've heard of women not wearing the hijab. In other areas like Kurdistan, Baluchistan, they are sending heavy armored artillery. For the past week, VPNs in Iran aren't working. So whenever there is real threat, all the VPNs that are controlled by the Revolutionary Guards themselves are turned off. Whereas before, you would not hear of people talking about any uprisings against the government or any dissent. But now we hear it on a daily basis of even those within the system complaining of the heavy-handed measure.
Both men executed over the weekend claimed they had been tortured in custody, and human rights groups united in condemnation of executions that were carried out without any equitable judicial process. The main news again. The leaders of the US, Mexico and Canada have condemned the weekend's uprising in Brazil that saw supporters of former President Jair Bolsonaro occupy government buildings, claiming last October's election was rigged. Talks aimed at averting industrial action in Britain's NHS have broken down without any agreement, and Russia and Ukraine are to discuss the possibility of prisoner exchanges when their respective human rights commissioners meet in Turkey. And that is the latest feature story news. Simon Marks reporting.
Sea anemones are the most disgusting of all tidal creatures. Their thick tentacle arms are engorged with the collected urine that makes up much of tide pools. Whale urine, fish urine, otter urine, crab urine, all sucked up by the moon and deposited in these natural outhouses. Clownfish share a symbiotic relationship with sea anemones. The clownfish cleans the sea anemone. In exchange, the anemone sprays urine on the face of the clownfish. It's one fetishistic delight. Contrary to popular belief, sea urchins are not in fact animals. Indeed, they are not alive at all. They are simply the clumped-together leavings of the ocean's denizens.
This is the Onion News Network.
You can help spread the ideas of liberty with our Patreon for just $5 per month at amps.freetalklive.com. Free Talk Live.
It's Free Talk Live. You can bring up whatever you want to talk about here. We started out the show with some uplifting news out of China, of all places, right on the heels of the tremendous success of what they call the white paper movement.
I learned why it was called that, by the way.
Oh, good.
It's because the Chinese government, they do so much to destroy freedom of speech.
Right.
So the idea is that a sheet of paper represents all of the things that you're afraid to write down. And that was why they were holding up a blank sheet of paper. It originated in Hong Kong when they were banned from having any sort of banners or phrases or logos or whatever it was shortly after the Chinese government retook over Hong Kong or whatever it was that happened. And because of that, since they couldn't have any pro-Hong Kong logos or phrases, they were like, okay, well, we'll just hold up blank sheets of paper. They can't do anything about that. And it sort of became a more widespread symbol because of that.
So it spread across the country during the COVID protests, and very, very cool. So glad you looked that up. Thank you for clarifying that. And so on the heels of that tremendous success, which of course the white paper movement resulted in the complete end to the zero COVID policy. That's over now. And the insane lockdowns, that's over now. People are back out, and they're emboldened, and they're now protesting fireworks bans that are in place in cities across the country. And we talked about how epic those have been. But we got somebody on the line here. He says his name is Ryan. And Ryan, where are you calling from tonight?
Albuquerque, New Mexico.
Okay. And you said you had some sort of thing in regards to Donald Trump, a banana peel, had something to do with Epstein. This was last year, and I don't know anything about what you're talking about. So can you try to clear that up for me?
I will try not to lose my PTSD. I've done 4.5 years prison with all charges dropped, and I did 3 of those years in isolation.
Yikes.
I got out 10 days after Donald Trump got out of office. All charges dropped, flown on 2 commercial flights home from isolation. Okay,
Whoa.
They had to change my diagnosis to PTSD from doing so much isolation. The people at Butner FMC, which is a mental prison, finally changed my diagnosis.
This is federal?
Yes.
Okay.
And they were saying I was schizophrenic so they could block all the evidence. Now, I've been saying for 25 years, even more, that I've had people from my high school stalking me. I just found the evidence. That 96 video, kids' 4th of July party, 96, that's me taking the video.
And how do you know that?
Well, I know, I remember it.
I mean, if you were there.
But I thought his memory got wiped. So.
Well, he didn't say that on the air. We hadn't gotten to that part yet, Bonnie, so I guess we're going to find out about that.
So my memory was wiped, but the thing is, whenever I rewatch it, I start remembering it, and that was 25 years ago. So
all right, okay, slow down. So we've gotten way deep here. You're just trying to understand what's going on. So let me see if I'm going to try to go back here. You were in prison, in federal prison. You were released after 4 years, you said.
Well, in two different stints. I threatened Governor Susana Martinez, who in that video, the J-Mar that they keep yelling, who's around the corner telling everyone I'm the worst human on earth. See, I graduated a billionaire at 18, but they diverted the money like Britney Spears to Donald Trump and Susana Martinez.
You graduated a billionaire? Hold up. How are you a billionaire at age 18?
Okay, whenever Jobs, Wozniacki, and Steve Jobs, Wozniacki, and Gates, they had a shop out here in 1988. This is where the computer started. So I walked in after a soccer game, and the guys had hard drive and they had RAM. They said, all right, kids, apparently you're a real smart kid. Which one of these should we use?
Hold on.
This one holds more.
Wait a minute. Ryan.
So I got the patent for the hard drive and memory connection.
Okay. So you're trying to say, and how old are you?
I'm 43.
You're 43. And this was in the 80s?
This is very important, yes.
Hold on. I'm just trying to follow you here. So you're saying Steve Jobs, the co-founder of, I believe, Apple Computer?
Yes, and Bill Gates.
And Bill Gates, the co-founder of Microsoft, or the founder of Microsoft, two competing companies. You're saying that in Albuquerque, New Mexico, your hometown, that these guys had a shop together.
You guys haven't read the book or seen the movie?
I don't know what movie.
What movie?
Well, you can look it up. I mean, in any of them. I mean,
sure. What movie?
Well, I don't know the name of it, but Jobs was in a movie.
I mean, just because there was a movie out there doesn't mean that it covered what you're talking about if you haven't seen it.
So it went up to somebody who was presumably 13 years or younger, asked him his opinion on what to do with it.
You walked in. Hold on, I just want to clarify. You walked into their computer shop, you're saying?
With my dad after a soccer game.
And you were, what, 10 years old?
8 years old.
8
my picture,
years old.
My picture on Instagram with Johnny Carson because I was on there for being the kid genius.
Really? And your name is Ryan Summers?
Yes.
Okay.
Now, that picture is extremely hard to find. But
okay. That's convenient.
But I can show it to you.
What's the Instagram handle?
I'm Ryan Summers.
Is that where we can find the picture on Instagram?
All right.
Yes.
Let's just take you at your word here, and let's move on in the story. Okay. So you became a billionaire on inventing the hard drive, apparently, or something like that. You graduated a billionaire, then
the combination of RAM and hard drive.
And then you ended up at this 90s party. There's video at a channel on YouTube called Len Enders, which appears to be just people hanging out at a party, drinking, teenagers, 20-somethings, that kind of thing. And how does this tie into Donald Trump, you having your memory wiped?
Ghislaine Maxwell.
Okay. 3 days ago, whenever I started remembering what was going on in this, I called the Manhattan Abuse Line hate crimes unit. So they saw that Jared Kushner was on the video. He's already been edited out. Jared Kushner and Ivana Trump met at this party, and there's a long story behind that. But
and where did this party take place? This was in New Mexico?
Yes, and the guy's lying about it, saying it's in Tacoma, Washington. Those guys stole a cop car from Tacoma, Washington. That's how crazy this is. It's essentially 2 different years. The warehouse video and this video got mashed up because they had.
What warehouse video?
Restroom. It's under Len Enders, and it's
same channel.
A party a year later.
Okay.
And that's at the Wool Warehouse in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Now, somebody that put that on, the reason this is horrible is those are all the Epstein-Maxwell people. Those are the recruiters for the Epstein-Maxwell Ranch.
You were hanging out with them when you were in your 20s?
Well, I graduated high school with them, and I wasn't hanging out with them. They were.
You were there at a party with them.
Now, hold on.
That's hanging out.
Just to clarify, it is true that Epstein did have a ranch in New Mexico. So that is true.
In Albuquerque, half an hour away.
Uh-huh.
These are the guys that did that. These are all multimillionaires. I mean, you could look up Jason Martinez. Okay, all my friends were around the corner while I was drugged, all right, with blood coming down my face. 3 people tried to help me. They got yelled at, like in fear, like,
Why are they drugging you? Why are they trying to harm you? What were you?
Because their goal, they figured out that I was going to be 18 years old, the richest kid to ever graduate.
Mm-hmm.
They had already planned with my parents to divert the money to Donald Trump and Susanna Martinez.
Why would your parents want to do that to you?
Because they're sociopaths.
Oh, man.
My mom is crazy. I mean, they
why did they have to drug you to do this, though?
Well, because they needed to make me insane. They needed to say I was schizophrenic.
But if you're under 18, your parents don't need that level, especially in the 80s in the United States. Your parents could just take whatever of yours they wanted because it was theirs, right?
But it was at my graduating semester, so I was beginning to turn 18, and they were losing control of the money unless they said I was insane.
But were you 18 or not?
No, I was 17 in that video.
Then I fail to see why your parents couldn't just have taken the money without drugging you or making you bleed out your face or whatever it was you said.
Well, because at some point they wanted to say I was schizophrenic so they could divert all the money. I mean, you don't understand how much money it is. Well, I guess you
did say you were a billionaire.
There may be some kind of rules where the parents couldn't touch it until he turned 18. I don't know. But the thing that confuses me is why did Bill Gates and the other guy give you $1 billion for deciding a thing when they could just be like, thanks, kid, have a good day. Here's all a sucker. You've invented the hard drive.
Because my dad is a master's in business degree, and I was 8 years old after a soccer game, walked in there with him because it was the first computer shop, and he's an engineer that's into that kind of thing.
Okay, so run this by me real quick. The specifics, right? What exactly did they ask you?
Okay, they said, I walked in there first. Bill Gates thought I broke a computer, and all I was doing was looking at it. And then Wozniacki comes out and, shut up, I'm the one that broke it. Stop saying things to the kid. So then they said, all right, kid, apparently you're a real smart kid. This kind of memory holds more than enough memory, but it's too slow. This kind of memory is more than fast enough, but it doesn't hold enough memory. What should we do? I said, well, can this fast memory, can it erase real quick? And they said, yeah. And I said, well, why don't you just have this slow memory talk to the fast memory? All two of their faces that were there were like, uh-oh. And my dad was like, yeah, we need to call the lawyers. So I had to wait outside for 3 hours.
Okay.
Should have called the lawyers before then.
Can I offer can I offer my opinion?
What?
I think you should get them to change your diagnosis back from PTSD back to schizophrenic.
It's the videos right there, bud.
There's no person in.
Apparently, Bill Gates did start Microsoft in Albuquerque.
Yes, you guys, come on.
Okay, so that much
I'm not
is
saying
true.
he didn't, man.
Well, the thing is, like with my sister who has some kind of something wrong with her where she denies reality, if there's a fact that is actually true, she'll roll with that one. She'll be like, so I went to, Damon Albarn looked at me while I was at the concert. He was worried about me, and he was wondering, he thought it was cute. Like, so it's not impossible that Damon Albarn looked at her, but her brain rolls with these other things.
Well, that's fine. But now, if that says it was filmed in Tacoma, Washington, that's to lead us to believe it was filmed there. But if the guy with the Michigan hat on is John Kiner, which it is, because I was there. I remembered having an altercation with him. He was trying not to play the game. I was like, what, punk? You're not going to say anything to me? Because that was edited out.
He was trying not to play what game?
To pretend that. See, I was walking around with blood on my face, and no one was helping me.
You didn't get you're walking around with a video camera with blood on your face, and you didn't turn around and be like, look what these people did to me?
That's what I'm doing, but it's all edited out. All they did was edit in the 16 minutes.
It's all part of the conspiracy, Arya. That's what you're not understanding.
The thing about a YouTube video is you can't just edit a YouTube video and leave it like that.
At the end of that party, I beat 3 people so bad that it's not good. Thomas Teller was one of them.
It's definitely not good when you beat people.
Violence is always bad.
Yeah, no doubt. All right, so Ryan, we're short on time for this conversation. It's gone on probably way too long, but it is an interesting look into what somebody believes happened, whether or not that actually happened. It's hard to say because you don't have a lot of evidence, right?
The risk reward to look into it. The video is clearly me. I mean, you'll see the
the camera person is never seen, so I don't know how you expect us to say it's clearly you.
And that's even the worst thing. In the warehouse video, it is seen, and that's whenever I went in the bathroom, but they mixed the bathroom into the warehouse.
Why do I need to watch this video if you say the thing has been edited of all the parts that you say are the most important?
Because it's still important.
Why?
Jared Kushner
It's a
was
bunch of
on that
people
video
partying.
3 days ago.
Is Jared
And,
Kushner visible in the video at any time?
He was, but they edited it out.
Yeah,
2 days
so he's
later.
not
So
anymore.
all of the parts, you keep telling us about all these parts of this video that are so important, and they've all been
Okay,
edited out.
Go to, I think it's 1405, and you'll hear them yell Jamar. Now, I'm sitting there talking to those 2 attractive girls, and that's where that thumbnail picture comes from. Now, that's because those were KKK princesses. And the second they were yelling Jamar, listen, Jamar's around the corner.
Who's
with my
Jamar?
5 friends. Jason Martinez, who's Susanna Martinez's nephew. Susanna Martinez is working with Jeb Bush, giving $1.25 trillion away in Florida.
And you mentioned...
Okay, hold on. If they got $1.5 trillion, why are they worried about your billion?
Florida doesn't have $1.2 trillion to give away. Their budget last year was $100-something billion. So
It's a charity.
They're not
It's
that.
a charity.
It's not that big.
He's working
dude.
with Jeb Bush.
Okay, but you mentioned this
working with Jeb
Martinez
Bush.
character.
In the 80s, too. $1 trillion in the 80s.
You said you allegedly threatened the governor of New Mexico, and that's why they put you in prison?
Yes, who is this guy?
Did you do that?
Oh, yeah, back in 2013.
So you actually
guys
threatened
have-
the governor of New Mexico?
You have no idea. She put her handicapped sister below me on my graduating semester of civil engineering at an Omni Apartments in Las Cruces, New Mexico. That police report exists.
Below you.
Okay, well, I mean,
what does that even
it sounds
mean?
horrible. I mean, I guess I don't know
If I ever graduated with a civil engineering degree, then I would be found not schizophrenic, and they would have to give me the money. But I have not been able to establish that in New Mexico. Out in Butner FM.
I got to tell you, you're going to have a tough time, Ryan, establishing that you're not schizophrenic.
So why did you threaten the governor?
I've already got the Manhattan police looking at Jared Kushner.
I don't think they are.
It's already been edited out.
Why did you attack the governor, though? Let's stay on that for a moment, because I didn't understand something about a handicapped sister.
Okay.
Why did you
Those
attack the
people
governor?
Also, what they did to me, you'll see 3 of those people were best friends with Jim Holmes. Those people were also from Las Cruces, New Mexico. Jim Holmes was the Aurora Batman murderer. They did what they're doing to me, they did to him.
Okay,
It
but
drove
Ryan,
him crazy
back to the governor, though. Why did you threaten the governor?
because she is in Las Cruces and she was covering it all up. Okay, Myron May, that worked in her law firm after a year after she became governor in Las Cruces, he was the FSU murderer. All right, they are driving people crazy. And I have that's the proof of the video, but it's heavily edited. I mean,
okay, well then it's not
16
proof.
2 hours.
If the video has been edited, then it is no longer proof. It's just from what we can tell, this video
What
is
sucks about this whole conversation is like I do believe that the government would have the not caring about humanity enough to drive people crazy and then use them to commit crimes. I believe that wholeheartedly. They did stuff like that.
MK Ultra.
They've been caught doing things like that. I mean, the government got caught killing JFK. So yeah, they would do that. But when somebody like this has no proof of anything they're saying, they can't prove one simple little thing, is telling really tall tales that, really amount to nothing. Like, I invented the Mac, whatever. I'm actually the genius behind Steve Jobs or whatever, and has no proof for it. It makes those other things seem just as crazy, and I'm tired of this conversation.
Yeah, I kind of feel
it's exhausting.
We've laughed a lot here tonight during this conversation. I mean, some of that was in bad sport, and I apologize for that because, I mean, honestly, man, I wasn't entirely kidding when I said to have your diagnosis for schizophrenia checked out again. You're striking off all the ticks of someone who has schizophrenia.
Well, I think he was saying he needed to get rid of the diagnosis in order to get the money.
Right, I understand that, but
that ain't going to happen.
No, because he's schizophrenic. There is no money.
Yeah.
He's imagined all of this, as Bonnie points out. Right. There's little nuggets of truth here and there, and he takes those and he seizes on them, like the fact that Bill Gates founded Microsoft in New Mexico or whatever, or that Epstein was in New Mexico. Right. He grabs those, and his imagination just runs with them into the land of fantasy, and it's a little bit concerning.
It's scary, yeah, for sure. Thank you, Ryan, for the call tonight. The number here is 603-283-6160. And, how does somebody like that get help? I mean, what kind of...
But imagine if everything he said was true, right?
And that's the other thing I feel bad about. I start laughing and then I start feeling bad because it's like if the government did do something to him for whatever reason, maybe he doesn't even know the real reason and he thinks it's the $1 billion. and they made him look crazy. Well, they succeeded, and and that sucks.
Yeah, I mean, living life, that crazy has got to be really difficult.
The other thing is it
How do
just
you do
seems
that?
like sometimes that the government sends people they've never called before, and all of a sudden they're calling in with this type of call, and it's like, was it to derail our China conversation that was actually really productive and talking about, protests in America and China and what we can learn from them? Was it to derail that? Because this conversation went nowhere.
Well, we let that happen. I mean, it was pretty clear within like the first 3 minutes that he was schizophrenic, and we talked to him for another 20 minutes after that. So I mean, that's on us, not the government.
That's true. I mean, I find crazy to be pretty fascinating sometimes. Like, just I want to go down the rabbit hole and see where. I mean, it's never going to go anywhere, right? But to just kind of see where in their mind they're coming from. Where does this come from?
I mean, when we can have a dialogue with them like we could with Ryan, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a fascinating insight to how the human mind can work.
And it's scary. Fascinating, like frightening, kind of fascinating. I mean,
because that could be any one of us.
Yeah, well, it could be, and also this person is clearly somebody who, allegedly threatened a governor over whatever belief systems that he has. Now, maybe that story's not true too, but I suspect it probably is.
And if nothing else, what did he say? He spent 3 years in isolation. Isolation,
that's not going to help.
Isolation can destroy your sanity for small periods of time, but 3 years?
Yeah, if he was a little bit crazy before he went into isolation for 3 years, guaranteed there's no turning back at that point. I mean, that is torture, generally considered to be torture to keep somebody away from other human beings, and that's what isolation does to you. So very, very scary stuff. I did look, by the way, to see if Wozniak has any connections to Albuquerque, because I was surprised, right? Like, to
Who's
find
Steve
out
Wozniak? I've heard the name before.
He's one of the co-founders of Apple Computer.
Okay.
Yeah. So he mentioned Steve Jobs. He mentioned Steve Wozniak. Those are the two, I believe, two of the founders of Apple, and then, of course, Bill Gates, the founder of Microsoft. So I was surprised to find out that part was true, that Bill Gates actually founded Microsoft apparently in Albuquerque, but I don't see any evidence here, at least at a first glance.
Yeah, did he steal code from some camp? That was in Washington, the state of Washington, I think.
I don't know.
We learned all of this, the history of personal computers when I was in junior high and high school, but I don't remember any of it. I'm sure I learned that he was in Mexico at some point, or New Mexico at some point. But the reason I was curious about his memory hard drive thing was because I have a degree in IT, and I did IT work for the better part of 10 years. I have a pretty good understanding of memory and how it functions, but I couldn't gain anything. It's not like he didn't say anything that was wrong.
Yeah.
It was just useless. Like, have this memory talk to the other memory. Like, okay,
you're 8 years old, dude.
And why wouldn't those two people who were asking him the question already have figured that out?
It doesn't.
Seems
it's ridiculous.
kind of simple, right?
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
Well,
it's
I've had some
Use
really
them both. I never thought about that.
Yeah.
I've had some really boneheaded moments where I'm like doing something in my studio or with the guitar or whatever, and someone comes along and says, "Why don't you just cut the knot, right? Instead of trying to unravel this great confusing thing, just take this and plug it into that, and duh,
solved."
Yeah.
Well, you were too deep within whatever you were looking at to really see the solution. That's true. That's why you want to get another pair of eyes on something. And it's certainly not unheard of for, what is it they say, from the mouths of babes, right? Like, kids are good at just saying the obvious thing or saying a thing that maybe you didn't think about, right? So, I mean, it's not entirely unbelievable claim on its face, but it is when he, like, what was the term he used? That he invented the RAM or the computer memory hard drive. Like he just kind of like jumbled a couple of computer terms together.
Yeah, and memory is very different from hard drives.
Well,
but the layman doesn't really understand that, which is why I was curious.
Yeah, and I don't feel like this person is more than a layman as far as his computer knowledge is concerned.
I don't think if I was a kid and I told Bill Gates and the other guy that I would have any claim to money for it. It would just be a conversation. Like, unless the dad already had a contract, which he admitted that they didn't. The dad was like, oh, we got to get lawyers involved after.
Yeah, it wasn't until much, much later that computer hard drives became RAM-based, right? So solid-state drives are actually not spinning disks anymore. They're actually memory chips, basically, as I understand it.
I never thought about it like that,
But I don't think that's what he was talking about, and it certainly didn't happen in 1989. More coming up.
Free Talk Live.
To be free is to be clear-headed.
I do encourage people.
Somebody gets down and smokes a joint and gets high. They sit on the couch and they turn into a blob.
Yeah, well, I don't think you know much about people that smoke pot, Christy.
Right. Yeah, Christy.
They procrastinate. That's what you guys were talking about on your show tonight. About
okay, then Christy, then what I can say then is the people that don't smoke pot make sweeping generalizations, because you just did. It seems like the vast majority of humans use some kind of substance throughout their day or week.
Not Christy. She doesn't.
Well,
what a sad state of affairs.
Do you have a cup of coffee in the morning, Christy?
And at this time in our history, if that's
we've always done it. Christy, it's been done throughout humans. People, how many people do you know, Christy, that can't function without a cup of coffee?
Well, you have to have a piece of bread to live, to survive.
We're not talking about food.
Free Talk Live, 7 nights a week from 7 to 10 Eastern, live on the Liberty Radio Network at LRN.FM.
From Feature Story News in Washington, I'm Simon Marks. The leaders of the US, Mexico and Canada have roundly condemned the weekend's uprising in Brazil that saw supporters of former President Jair Bolsonaro occupy and vandalize government buildings in the capital, Brasilia. At least 1,200 people have been detained by the authorities. US National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan is traveling with President Biden in Mexico City.
There is absolutely no doubt about where President Biden of the United States stands on this assault on democracy, democratic institutions, and the peaceful transfer of power. The United States speaks clearly with one voice on this issue.
Mr. Bolsonaro, meanwhile, has been admitted to a hospital in Florida suffering from abdominal pain amid reports that he has taken advice in recent days from figures within former President Donald Trump's inner circle. Correspondent Ewan Marshall is in Sao Paulo.
He did speak up last night after the storming of Congress, suggesting that these kind of violent riots is not what he wants. He was kind of comparing them to left-wing protests, which never actually could be compared with the extent of the damage that was committed last night.
The British government is block booking beds at the country's care homes in a bid to free up space in hospitals after NHS workers announced their planned industrial action is going ahead. Talks with the government ended on Monday without agreement. Sarah Gorton is with the Labour union Unite.
There was acknowledgement that there is an understanding from the Secretary of State of the trade union's position that resolution to the dispute is entirely possible on our side, but needs a firm commitment to boosting pay for this year, as well as a commitment to talks for the following pay year.
Meanwhile, 7,000 nurses in New York have taken to picket lines demanding higher pay and increased staff capacity. 2 major hospitals in New York City are affected. Russia and Ukraine are to discuss the possibility of prisoner exchanges when their respective human rights commissioners meet in Turkey. A Ukrainian news agency says Kiev is expecting, quote, the return of our heroes and heroines. From FSN's bureau in Moscow, where he operates within the Kremlin's reporting restrictions, Stuart Smith with more.
Prisoner exchanges have happened before, most recently on Sunday. They usually include tens or hundreds of troops, usually 1 Russian for 1 Ukrainian. This meeting will be a rare example of direct communication between both countries, which may signal a bigger exchange is being looked into, or that the way they take place is up for discussion. Moscow's Human Rights Commissioner also commented on Monday about Russia's use of criminals to fight in Ukraine. She said that their release was all in accordance with the law, but is a state secret, meaning the details of the arrangement cannot be released. The first group of prisoners recruited to fight in Ukraine are now free in Russia, having completed their 6-month contract and with all criminal records cleared.
From bureaus worldwide, this is FSN.
Yep, we still do email. Drop your email address in the entry box at freetalklive.com, and you'll be kept in the loop with Free Talk Live.
It is Free Talk Live, and you can join the show here, and you can literally bring up anything you want, even if it makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. Trying to find the story about him allegedly threatening the governor of New Mexico. I couldn't find it.
The prior caller?
Yeah, the previous caller who believes that he invented the hard drive RAM connection or something in the 1980s when he was an 8-year-old child who happened to wander into a computer store allegedly run by Bill Gates and Steve Wozniak and Steve Jobs, who were competitors in the computing world, I'm pretty sure by that time. But
it was a unique story.
Yeah, I couldn't find anything about the governor per se, but he did get accused in 2015 of threatening a state senator with something. Ended up being cleared of the charges. Says here that Ryan Summers left a profanity-laced voicemail to a man named Pete Domenici in the Mexico State Domenici Institute. Summers accused the former New Mexico senator of being involved in a program that turned James Holmes into a mass murderer.
I mean, this sounds like the guy we just spoke to.
Yeah, he was talking about that James Holmes guy.
Holmes opened fire, if you may recall, in a Colorado movie theater. After undergoing psychiatric evaluation, Summers was released from the Torrance County Jail. Officials say he does not pose a risk to others. Let's go to the phones here. We've got Major Payne on the line. Go ahead, Major.
Yeah, that last caller sounded like quite a firecracker.
He's got a story to tell. Whether how much of it's true, I don't know.
Well, I'm right back to China. If you look to antiquity, they invented gunpowder.
Yeah.
The Persians were the first ones to even figure out how to use it in a grenade, an explosive factor.
Whoa, I didn't know that.
I think China is finally fixing to swallow its own M80.
What does that mean?
Well, they're going to have their own firecrackers stuffed down their throat by their own people.
Yeah, people are getting tired of being told what to do over there. You're referring to the first hour of the show where we talked about the fireworks protest, where people are they're out in the streets, they're launching mortars out into the air, they're launching mortars out their sunroof window in a major show of disobedience to these fireworks bans that are across the country.
Realizes finally, because the Chinese never could figure out how to contain the power of the powder in the rifle or the cannon, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they're finally figuring out that, hey, I can empty out these firecrackers and put it in a piece of half-inch pipe and make me a zip gun.
Well, I don't know if I don't think their intention is to use them for.
Just through firecrackers can arm themselves.
Well, yeah, I don't know. I mean, maybe there's some of them that have that intention. At this point, they're just partying and they're throwing, they're shooting off fireworks into the sky. You're saying you think they could turn them into weapons?
I think what they're doing now is more powerful than just killing a cop or whatever. Because it's not like Xi Jinping is going to walk up to them and then they're just going to get to blast a firework in his face and it's all going to be over. It's more powerful to be sending a message and telling the cops, you can't stop us. It's all over the country now. I mean, I think that it's better for them to just be, being defiant.
And fireworks are loud and they're bright and they're colorful and they're hard to hide. If you want to get someone's attention and tell them that they're not alone in their protest, shoot off some fireworks. The government can't hide that the way they could some of these protests.
Mm-hmm.
That one, it's apparent.
You're going to get some attention.
Yeah, when your neighbors are shooting off fireworks.
Major, anything else you want to share?
You can take a bunch of kids with bottle rockets and distract the military and then blow up whatever they're parked upon. They don't know the demon they created, and it's fixing to kick them in the arse.
Well, I got to say, if it takes down the communist government of China, I can't say I'll be shedding any tears over it. Thank you for the call tonight, Major. I appreciate it. The number here is 603-283-6160. Just to give you the final update here on the fireworks story. Again, we talked about how people were doing protests in China over the last week or so. Major numbers of people in the streets shooting off a tremendous amount of fireworks into the air. It's just incredible. Cops trying to crack down. According to Radio Free Asia, in an update posted this weekend, authorities in some Chinese cities have lifted fireworks bans in the wake of nationwide protests and ahead of the Lunar New Year on January 22nd, while some have doubled down on the ban, punishing local residents for setting off fireworks as an example, according to Chinese media reports. Local governments in Dongying and Binzhou cities in the eastern province of Shandong have announced via their official websites that fireworks and firecrackers will be allowed to usher in the Year of the Rabbit. And authorities in Beijing and the northeastern port city of Dalian will allow fireworks within limited hours until the first month of the lunar calendar. So they're backing off a little bit, it sounds like, and then they're going to try to bring back the ban.
Well, they've got to do something. I mean, fireworks on the New Year, that's sort of going to happen. So it doesn't seem like the Chinese government is really learning a lot. They're just sort of, they seem to know what they can and can't get away with. And they're not interested in pushing it at this point. That's my takeaway.
In the past few days, a lot of places have announced cases of people being punished for illegally setting off fireworks as a warning, it said. This is according to some press release. Citing administrative penalties handed out by police in Wenzhou City in the eastern Zhejiang province.
Wait, I'm confused about the warning. Was the person setting off the firework as a warning, or was the person punished as a warning?
Punishing them as a warning to others.
What is that? Oh, warning to others.
We're going to arrest you and sentence you, and then hopefully your associates will stop setting off fireworks.
That's just a barbaric way of doing, quote, justice.
Well,
right?
That's how it always is.
I know, but it's so
they do
barbaric.
It in the US,
I know. That doesn't make it any less barbaric, though. To punish one person to deter another person from committing a crime, that's what justice is served by doing that.
And it almost never works.
It's just like whipping boys of the Middle Ages. It might as well be returning to that. Punish this person instead of that person. Make an example of them.
Look what happened with Ross Ulbricht. They specifically said when sentencing him for running a website, the Silk Road, when he was sentenced to 2 life sentences plus 40 years, it was, quote unquote, to send a message. And has that ended underground drug marketplaces on the internet?
No, of course not.
And is that what you thought judges' jobs were supposed to do in this country?
To send a message?
To send messages to other people?
These underground markets, just like torrenting, it's a hydra. You cut off one head and 2 will grow in its place every single time.
It quoted county officials in the northern province of Hebei as saying the ban will continue, and scotching, quote, fake news that setting off fireworks and firecrackers can disinfect the air.
What?
Wait, what?
And kill the COVID-19 virus.
Hold on, run this by me again.
Who was sending that disinformation?
It's not clear here. This may be the... I don't know.
I didn't catch any of it. My brain was not prepared to process that.
Yeah, I'm trying to read this paragraph here. It just says here, the bans will remain in place in some places, and they're saying they're handing out the penalties, which is what we said, and then it quoted county officials in Hebei province as saying the ban will continue, and quote, fake news. So they're trying to apparently the government is trying to counter fake, quote unquote, fake news that may be going on amongst the people, allegedly, where they believe that setting off fireworks and firecrackers can disinfect for COVID-19.
That's just really bizarre. I would have thought it was the other way around.
Or is
like that the government was trying to say, oh, don't worry, these people who aren't protesting. The people who are protesting are just trying to disinfect for COVID-19.
Maybe that's...
No, but it's not, because the government's trying to disband or, stop that disinformation. So I can't imagine
but maybe it's still being made up by the government, right? So maybe maybe this is like a really lame-o story the government is making up to try to excuse why people are setting off fireworks. Oh, no. It's not a protest against the fireworks bans. It's because they all heard fake news that you could get rid of COVID.
Yep. That's probably it.
I think that's it. And that's such a bizarre take that I can't imagine any other explanation. Because the people of China, they're not stupid. They know that fireworks are not going to disinfect the air. I mean, I don't know. It makes sense in a weird sort of way, right? It is a little mini explosion, and there's probably not too many germs and bacteria that can survive through an explosion. So maybe in that sense but no one in China is setting off fireworks because they think it's disinfecting the air of COVID-19. That's not what is happening. And I feel you're absolutely right. The Chinese government is they're doing damage control here. No, they're not protesting, but no. See, they think
they're just ignorant.
Yeah, they think they're curing COVID-19. Right. That's why this is happening.
This makes me disbelieve a lot more the idea that the people or anyone in China is like upset that the lockdowns are over. I mean, I'm sure some amount of people are, like the most brainwashed people probably are, like, oh no,
yeah, just like the people that are still wearing masks around here.
Yeah, but I'm just saying, it makes me disbelieve that it's like, oh, most, Chinese people, because there was something in earlier in this article that made it seem like, people are venting because they're upset that the lockdowns are over because they're scared of COVID. I mean, I don't believe it.
Hard to say. Commentator King Peng, based in New York, was looking at the situation. He says this: the Chinese people have so much pain and anger stored up from the last 3 years that a lot of places have erupted under the pressure. He says further, the authorities know very well they have provoked public anger and that it's not just among a minority group, but that it runs right through all of China's cities and villages. King suggested that the ruling Chinese Communist Party could even have a superstitious aversion to explosives designed to scare away evil spirits. He said, quote, they say, of course, that it's for reasons of safety or cleanliness, but firecrackers have another meaning, which is exorcising evil spirits, and the party knows itself to be evil, he said.
I like that take on it.
Now,
it's
an interesting take, but do they actually,
No.
Do people in government, how many of the people in government actually think of themselves
I think
as
that
evil?
A lot of them do. Like saying that they don't is kind of like absolving them of their things they're doing. It's like maybe there is a certain portion that believe like I'm doing the right thing. Like the lower people, the people who are just pencil pushers in the FBI, yeah, they probably think they're doing the right thing. But the people in the top, like Xi Jinping, how could you possibly believe you're doing the right thing? There's just I can't conceive of that. I think they're psychopaths and they don't care who they hurt to get what they want.
Well,
and
we
it's the
can't-
only explanation, really.
We can't conceive of it because we don't like controlling other people. There's not a bone in my body that wants to control the lives of other people, and I suspect the same is true of
Yeah,
you
but
as well.
he doesn't just want to control the lives of other people because he wants to make their lives better. He's doing things like killing people.
But he thinks that's making everything better.
Does he think that killing Uyghur Muslims is making everything better?
He seems to.
From the
I
Chinese
think that's just
Communist
excusing
perspective.
him. What is
We're not
better?
excusing him.
No, I'm not on purpose, but it kind of is. It's the.
I've always said that the argument that you have to break an egg to make an omelet just means eventually you're going to be the egg that's broken, right? That's what people like Xi Jinping believe. Okay, I mean, yes, it sucks. We got to kill some Uyghur Muslims, but it's to make the whole of society more cohesive. It's to make China more united culturally and ethnically.
Yeah, there's all kinds of propaganda that, even people like Xi Jinping or Kim Jong-un, they were raised with this crap, right? Like this has been hammered into them from day zero. They've been around and they've been within the Communist Party. They've been hit with this propaganda constantly. So like I think they do believe a lot of this stuff, even though it is psychopathy. The guy probably is a psychopath. I mean, almost certainly, right? Like government people in those positions, you pretty much have to be a sociopath or a psychopath to seek out positions like that. But that doesn't mean they're not justifying their psychopathy, right? Like that they I don't know. You have to wonder about that. And will we ever find out what these people truly believe? Probably not.
I think they probably I suspect most of them truly believe what they're doing is for the greater good.
But human beings know that killing other people is bad. There's just no way around it. If you know that, like, you touch something hot, it'll hurt you, you realize that burning another person is wrong. And the thing is, like, psychopathy is like 1% of the entire population of the world. It's not like everywhere. They could only be secondary psychopaths unless they're just a really rare anomaly.
But see, we don't believe in the greater good. They do. They do believe in this existing thing, this society or the institution of China or whatever, and they believe that they can make it better, that it does have characteristics like cohesion and strength and unity and financial stability and all of these other things, and that it's like the idea that if your finger is gangrenous, you have to cut off the finger to save the hand.
Yeah, but they don't use it to make better lives for the people. That would be the only explanation for making that would be the only justification for the greater good argument. Like, if they were making propaganda to make the lives of everyone just like equally bad and good for themselves. So I just don't believe it. I don't believe that they think that they're making China better.
I think the lives of the average Chinese person has improved substantially.
It has.
And I hate myself for even saying this, under the Chinese Communist Party.
Well, because they did more like capitalist things for a while. Now they're
Right, but that's
chopping
not going to
back.
stop the Communist Party from taking responsibility for it, and probably for believing that they were the reason it happened.
Well, then why are they cutting back on
Well,
it now?
yeah, Xi Jinping has gone back on some of the things those advancements that did happen under whatever his predecessor was. But a little bit more here from RFA.org. This is Radio Free Asia reporting on the fireworks protests and the protests against the COVID restrictions. A democracy activist, veteran democracy activist Wang Juntao, settled in the U.S., says there's an uneasy stalemate now in China between popular anger, Communist Party leadership, and local governments. He says this is a forced compromise between Xi Jinping and local governments because Jinping can control the elite, but he cannot control mass incidents at the edges of the political system. If he won't delegate more power to local governments and they can't stamp out protests, then they have to make concessions instead. If he delegates any more power to the local governments, they could use it to turn on Xi Jinping rather than the general public, which is interesting. I did not know there was such a conflict between the local and the national governments there in China.
I didn't either. It's kind of surprising to hear that, the local government in Shanghai could conceivably turn against Xi Jinping.
I mean, you would think they would have some serious influence, right? I mean, Shanghai is a city of 25 million people.
It's weird, though, because, I mean, they did everything Xi Jinping wanted them to in the lockdowns.
They did. And they destroyed their economy as a result of it, right? So maybe they're feeling some remorse for that. He says all he can do is compromise given the situation. Qin, one of the other analysts here, said both the fireworks protests and the white paper movement of late November that was followed by an abrupt end to Xi's zero COVID policy in early December has shaken the Communist Party's system of governance. Quote, the Communist Party wants to make temporary concessions because they imagine that it's a way of releasing the pressure of public anger and resentment. However, he said the approach could backfire, saying further, firstly, any concessions made by the Communist Party will encourage ordinary people and help them realize that resistance is valuable and can force the government to compromise if it's successful. They then believe that they should keep up their resistance if there is a problem. And so, yeah, I think that that was similar to your analysis, I think, earlier here tonight, Aria, that these people are being emboldened by their successes, and they're taking up another issue now with the fireworks. And now they're having some success on this issue. As we've pointed out, some cities have rolled back the fireworks restrictions. Some are trying to crack down. But with the level of disobedience we're seeing in the streets, at least from the video clips that are coming out from China, I think this bodes well for the future of those people's freedom.
I think the conflict between the local governments and the federal government, whatever they're calling in China, also bodes well for the freedom of the people. If it's possible that
drive that wedge in further.
Yeah, if it's possible that Xi Jinping's power structure is being weakened because he's having to delegate more power to the cities in order to keep the people happy, then sounds like a good thing to me. Less centralization.
Right. Maybe there should be a Chinese secession movement.
Well, good luck.
Yeah, good luck. Yeah. Ain't gonna be easy. Whatever you're gonna get, whatever concessions you're gonna get in China, it's gonna be rough, right? Like it always is. Trying to change these situations involve taking serious risks, people putting their lives and their freedom, whatever freedoms that they have in China, on the line, and it's gonna be, somebody's going to a prison cell.
Perhaps it takes less risk in China, though, which is sort of my point earlier, that the Chinese government is so unaccustomed to protest that any protest gets a result, whereas in the United States, you do have to go to a more extreme length.
That's a good point. Let's go to the phones here. You are on the air. What's your name, caller?
Jamie.
Jamie, calling from Alabama?
Yes, sir.
All right, what's on your mind?
Yeah, I heard about this young athlete that's younger than me in his 20s.
Mm-hmm.
He's a football player, and he got hit in the chest during the game, and it did something to his heart. They're trying to figure out if it was a COVID shot or not.
Oh, was this the football clip from over the weekend or sometime last week?
It was a week or two ago.
Yeah,
I looked it up and stuff, but they haven't come out and said. It's not like his hospital came out and said this is what it was or anything like that.
Well, but if he's in the NFL, it's almost certainly he's been vaccinated, right?
Yeah, he's definitely has to have been vaccinated, but it's just, I don't know.
And this guy's in his 20s, as I understand it, correct?
He's like 23.
I heard he's like 20-something. I forgot his name, though, but he's like in his 20s. 27, I think.
It's not like normal for a 23-year-old to just pass out like we've seen, but it's different in this case because he got hit in the chest. Like, I'm not saying that it cannot be the vaccine. I just don't want to jump to the conclusion and make myself look silly if somebody getting hit in the chest is the reason that they passed out.
There's plenty of young people who are in sports who are literally dying on the field in so many different occasions. It's shocking how often it's happening in the last couple of years. So, I mean, if that doesn't have anything to do with the vaccine, I don't know. Yeah. It's hard to say that this is definitely not normal.
Yeah, well, everybody was shocked out about it. I mean, on the radio, they're praying over this dude, and he's an athlete. I'm not, so I mean, it was kind of shocking how an athlete in his 20s, yeah.
All right.
Well, a professional athlete at that, like top physical condition at the top of his field, presumably. I mean, even if you're not the best NFL football player, if you're even in the NFL, you're
at the top.
Yeah, you're a damn good athlete. And 20-something years old. Yeah, but, as Bonnie pointed out, he was in a highly physical... There's a reason that so many of these people have brain damage after their careers. I mean, this is a very physical sport, so it's not at all unlikely that he just got hit in the chest in the wrong way. You beat somebody with a sledgehammer in the chest, and eventually they're probably going to have cardiac arrest.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, good point.
Thank you, Jamie. Anything else you want to share?
He was a live wire.
Was there anything else you wanted to share tonight, Jamie?
Summers guy, he was a live wire.
Who?
A live wire. The Summers guy was a live wire.
Oh,
yeah,
the caller.
He was crazy.
The caller from earlier. Gotcha. Yeah.
Yeah, I forgot his first name already.
Good luck to him. I don't know how you... I can't even imagine going through life like that. And I thank you, Jamie, for the call here tonight. It's just so frustrating because, some people who are crazy like that, like they can take care of themselves, right? Like they can clean their house. Some of them are actually really good at cleaning things, right? So like it doesn't, just because he might be schizophrenic doesn't mean he can't necessarily live without assistance. He doesn't need somebody to wipe his butt for him or whatever. But man, how do you work? How do you? What kind of jobs can you hold down when you're like that?
I suspect he could hold down any sort of job. He didn't seem like he was unstable. Certainly.
I don't want to put him in touch with customers. I'll tell you that. Maybe he can handle like a stock room, pulling product and putting it in a box or something like that. But I would not want him interacting with potential clients.
Front desk at a hotel.
Right, yeah.
Plenty of time for like small talk
He's
there.
going to be giving them stories, and then they're not going to want to come, work wherever or buy things from you or whatever.
That's fair. I mean, I don't think people should be institutionalized against their will necessarily.
I don't either.
I mean, I suspect there's some percentage of the population that like needs that. But
there is, unfortunately, and that's something that libertarians have a tough time with.
Right.
I heard somebody telling me that I can't remember if it was a caller. I think somebody called in and said like I needed to be put into the hospital.
That sounds familiar. Yeah. Well, I've definitely been in circumstances where I've seen that happening. There was a guy that was living across the street. We had to disarm at one point because he had lost his mind due to lack of sleep. And we could not get him in a place where he was going to be okay, and so we had to call and have him committed. And it's hard for somebody that cares about individual freedom to do that.
Hey, you are going to love the movie Victimless Crime Spree. It's hilarious, heartwarming, and carries a ton of inspiring freedom messages. Feeling down about the lack of liberty in your life? You need to put on this film with some friends and have a good laugh. It's a true story about me and my friends in New Hampshire living free, singing, dancing, and getting arrested. Of course, it's all on video, and the bad guys, the cops, judges, bailiffs, and sheriffs, they all play their part like it's out of a movie or something. You would think we scripted the whole thing, but it's real life. Go ahead and have a watch, and if it's been a while, have another look. I guarantee you'll notice things now that you didn't notice before. And the best part is that you're going to walk away feeling a renewed sense of your own power. You are the master of your destiny, and you will be free in your lifetime. Victimless Crime Spree.
Looking for a great real estate investment? Consider New Hampshire, which is ground zero for the Liberty Movement. Your first call should be to Mark Worden from Porcupine Real Estate. He's more than just a real estate agent. He's your New Hampshire concierge. Where are the best places to live? Do you want farm, city, the burbs, or forest? Do you want a duplex or multifamily building so that renters pay your mortgage? There are homes in all price ranges in New Hampshire, and Mark can help with financing too. Invest in Liberty and property. Mark Worden can help.
PorcupineRealEstate.com.
If you want to know the latest about Free Talk Live before we go on the air, all you need to decide is how you want it delivered. It's your choice. Visit news.freetalklive.com to receive our usually weekly news updates by email. Plus, we have a Twitter account at twitter.freetalklive.com, and you can follow us on the decentralized Mastodon platform at toot.freetalklive.com. So please follow us at toot.freetalklive.com and sign up for our emails at news.freetalklive.com.
You're listening to the live edition of Free Talk Live. Hour number 3 is next after the news here on the Liberty Radio Network at LRN.FM.
From Feature Story News in Washington, I'm Simon Marks. The leaders of the US, Mexico and Canada have roundly condemned the weekend's uprising in Brazil that saw supporters of former President Jair Bolsonaro occupy and vandalize government buildings in the capital, Brasilia. At least 1,200 people have been detained by the authorities. US National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan is traveling with President Biden in Mexico City.
There is absolutely no doubt about where President Biden of the United States stands on this assault on democracy, democratic institutions, and the peaceful transfer of power. The United States speaks clearly with one voice on this issue.
Mr. Bolsonaro, meanwhile, has been admitted to a hospital in Florida suffering from abdominal pain amid reports that he has taken advice in recent days from figures within former President Donald Trump's inner circle. Correspondent Ewan Marshall is in Sao Paulo.
He did speak up last night after the storming of Congress, suggesting that these kind of violent riots is not what he wants. He was kind of comparing them to left-wing protests, which, never actually could be compared with the extent of the damage that was committed last night.
The British government is block booking beds at the country's care homes in a bid to free up space in hospitals after NHS workers announced their planned industrial action is going ahead. Talks with the government ended on Monday without agreement. Sarah Gorton is with the Labour union Unite.
There was acknowledgement that there is an understanding from the Secretary of State of the trade union's position that resolution to the dispute is entirely possible on our side, but needs a firm commitment to boosting pay for this year, as well as a commitment to talks for the following pay year.
Meanwhile, 7,000 nurses in New York have taken to picket lines demanding higher pay and increased staff capacity. 2 major hospitals in New York City are affected. Russia and Ukraine are to discuss the possibility of prisoner exchanges when their respective human rights commissioners meet in Turkey. A Ukrainian news agency says Kyiv is expecting, quote, the return of our heroes and heroines. From FSN's bureau in Moscow, where he operates within the Kremlin's reporting restrictions, Stuart Smith with more.
Prisoner exchanges have happened before, most recently on Sunday. They usually include tens or hundreds of troops, usually one Russian for one Ukrainian. This meeting will be a rare example of direct communication between both countries, which may signal a bigger exchange is being looked into, or that the way they take place is up for discussion. Moscow's Human Rights Commissioner also commented on Monday about Russia's use of criminals to fight in Ukraine. She said that their release was all in accordance with the law, but is a state secret, meaning the details of the arrangement cannot be released. The first group of prisoners recruited to fight in Ukraine are now free in Russia, having completed their 6-month contract and with all criminal records cleared.
From bureaus worldwide, this is FSN. With FSN Spotlight, I'm Simon Marks. Today, the new year in Iran. It has begun with the regime executing 2 more men in connection with the country's ongoing protests, one of them a national karate champion. The uprising against the government shows no sign of abating nearly 4 months after it began, and some observers say they're witnessing a growing desperation on the part of the Iranian government. Nazanin Ansari is the managing editor of Kayan London, a weekly Persian Persian language newspaper critical of the authorities in Tehran.
Even in Mashhad and in the airports, we've heard of women not wearing their hijab. In other areas like Kurdistan, Baluchistan, they are sending heavy armored artillery. For the past week, VPNs in Iran aren't working. So whenever there is real threat, all the VPNs that are controlled by the Revolutionary Guards themselves are turned off. Whereas before, you would not hear of people talking about any uprisings against the government or any dissent. But now we hear it on a daily basis of even those within the system complaining of the heavy-handed measures.
Both men executed over the weekend claimed they had been tortured in custody, and human rights groups united in condemnation of executions that were carried out without any equitable judicial process. The main news again. The leaders of the US, Mexico and Canada have condemned the weekend's uprising in Brazil that saw supporters of former President Jair Bolsonaro occupy government buildings, claiming last October's election was rigged. Talks aimed at averting industrial action in Britain's NHS have broken down without any agreement, and Russia and Ukraine are to discuss the possibility of prisoner exchanges when their respective human rights commissioners meet in Turkey. And that is the latest feature story news. Simon Marks reporting.
Coming up a little later, the 10 best careers for someone at your level of attractiveness.
Oh, but right now we have something truly incredible for you. Kenneth Quinn is a real-life psychic medium who claims that he can communicate with dead acquaintances. He's written a new book. It's called Small Talk from Beyond, Speaking with Distant Relatives and Friends of Friends Who Have Passed.
Hi,
Good
Kenneth.
to see you. Now,
Thank
Kenneth,
you.
you've written that you're able to connect people with the spirits of their old college professors or roommates that they didn't really know that well. When did you realize that you had this gift?
Well, it was the day after my cousin's friend's wife's funeral. I was at home and I suddenly felt a presence in the room with me. And I heard a voice say, "It's Vicky. Vicky Solchek, Dale's wife."
Wow.
We made a Tim's birthday thing a while back, and we talked about how hard it is having a cat.
Fascinating.
This has been so amazing.
This has been fabulous. Thank you, Kenneth Quinn, for being our guest. Stay with us because coming up next, we're going to show you how to lose some of that excessive weight by constantly picking at your skin.
This is the Onion News Network.
Got Telegram? You can follow our channel there and discuss show prep with other listeners at telegram.freetalklive.com. Free Talk Live.
It's Free Talk Live. We are kicking off the third hour of the program here. It's Ian, Bonnie, and Aria joining you tonight. The phones are open. If you want to join us, you can. You can bring up whatever is on your mind. The number is 603-283-6160. That's 603-283-6160. You can join us online. Just head over to freetalklive.com and enjoy the features that we have waiting for you there. Lots of different things that you can do at freetalklive.com, including download the show. We've got the podcast is back to its old ways, back prior to September when we did some experimenting with the podcast there for a little while. And our experiment didn't work. We were hoping that going Daily Digest only would encourage more sharing, more views, or more listens, that sort of thing. And, we changed our mind on that one and went back to the old ways where you get all of the content in the feed. And if you don't like some of it, well, we have filtered feeds that you can subscribe to. So if you still just want to get the Daily Digest only, you can do that. Just go to feeds.freetalklive.com. There's a special feed there for that. There's also a feed if you only, you don't like the digest, you just want to get just the show. There's a feed for that too.
Which is somewhat more understandable. Like if you're going to listen to the full show, then there's literally nothing for you in the digest. Because the digest only has the content that you can also find in the full show. The digest just cuts it down into an easily digestible 30 minutes best of that episode.
So yeah, check that out at feeds.freetalklive.com. And then, of course, there's the normal feed, which has all of those things in it. Maybe some days you want the digest. Maybe some days you don't want the digest. You're pressed for time, so you need the digest, that kind of thing. So it's up to you how you can consume what we put out there, which you can learn more about at feeds.freetalklive.com. All right, so Aria, you found a type of surgery tonight that was a surprise to you, and And you've done a little bit of research on surgeries. You've gone under the knife at least once or so in the last year.
Twice.
Yeah,
as it turns out. Yep.
I was going to say, is there like public about that? Some people
I didn't want to
don't
reveal
say.
it.
I appreciate that. I assumed there was a reason you were.
Yeah, I knew
hedging.
I knew you had mentioned you had a surgery, but you didn't say how many or exactly what.
Yeah, I've had 2 surgeries. For anyone curious, I have to find. Here it is. One of them was a forehead contouring, a brow lift, so to speak, a facial feminizations, basically. That was the simpler of the 2 procedures. The other is a lawsuit waiting to happen at some point. What other recourse do I have, man? I had vocal surgery in January of last year, and I did everything I was supposed to do. I quit smoking beforehand. I still
quit smoking.
Have not had a cigarette or any nicotine in more than a year. Super proud of
Congrats.
that. By the way. Thank you.
We've been a year on drinking.
Awesome.
Yep.
I don't know the exact day that I quit smoking because the last cigarette I smoked, it meant nothing to me. You know, a lot of people are like, oh, I quit smoking on this day. This is my last one. I'm like, I legitimately don't know. It was somewhere in December or January. That's all I know because it was meaningless to me. It was just, here's
Gross
the thing I've been doing.
point?
It wasn't, well, it was gross, but not, it was gross because of the Chantix that I was on, making it more gross. Anyway. So I ended up having vocal surgery as well, and Adam's apple reduction, trachea shaving is what they call it. Sounds super painful when they put it that way. Yeah.
Yeah.
And clearly, the vocal surgery was botched. I don't know what else to say at this point. My voice has never recovered, and from what I can tell, it's never going to recover. It certainly isn't feminized. It's slightly higher pitched than it was.
What do you mean by recover? Like,
there's no depth to it. There's no strength to my voice. If someone breaks into my house and tries to murder me, no one will hear me screaming for help. Because my voice just isn't there. It can't make that volume of noise. So yes, 2 different surgeries, but those were, as I mentioned previously, in the direction of making myself more what I want to be, feminizing myself, transitioning. I'm trans, as listeners may not be aware. Everyone has something about their body that they don't like. Sometimes it's a minor thing. Sometimes it's a major thing, right? Like I don't like my broad shoulders. Not enough to do anything about it, right?
Okay.
I didn't like my muscles. Not enough to do anything about it. This guy that
You're
we're
usually
talking
better off being okay with yourself,
Right.
even though you might not like a thing or two, because as you pointed out here, surgery has serious risks.
Yes.
Right? Anytime you go under the knife, there's a risk of death.
There is.
Anytime you have surgery.
you can die from the anesthesia being done wrong.
Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, it's pretty serious. So what's this guy doing?
So this guy is getting leg lengthening surgery, but as you point out, any surgery is a matter of risk. Like, is this a thing that's serious enough that I'm willing to die to have it fixed?
That's basically what you have to ask yourself. Yeah.
Yeah, because no matter what the chance of death actually is, there's always some chance of death, especially for some of these facial surgeries and feminization surgeries like this one, where they literally cut off my face, chiseled away bone, and then put my face back on. Right? That
sounds so crazy.
So much can go wrong in that.
Yeah.
So you gotta
didn't you have headaches for months?
Yeah, and I still do, and there's still 2 bumps. But again, lawsuits waiting to happen. Those aren't as big a concern to me as the voice thing. So this guy, he's short. He's 5'2".
Of course he is.
And I can
That's my height.
I can sympathize with the plight of short people. One of my best friends is short, and I mean like short, probably 5'3", 5'4", something like that. And
it's tough for a guy.
A guy?
Yeah, it can't be easy, man. And I say this as someone who's a little over 6 feet tall. I'm not unusually tall, but I'm taller than the average American. It's got to be difficult.
It has to be, especially considering women tend to like taller guys.
They do. And this guy mentions this. So I'm going to skip part of it and get right into the article here.
Where's it from? I'm sorry, you might have already said
It's from Business Insider.
Okay.
As a school counselor, Ibrahim Aljan's job, and I'm going to butcher his name repeatedly, so I'm just going to go with Abraham, was to help young people solve their problems, yet he couldn't solve his own, a serious height complex. And this is why I sympathize with him, why I understand his desire to have the surgery, right? If you're 5'2", people have been picking on you for your height and making jokes about your height your entire life. Even if they're good-natured and you've learned to adapt and laugh about it, it's going to cause some issues. Abraham, who's now 30, is from the city of Adana in southern Turkey. He was 5'2" and has strong feelings about his height. If you're shorter, people don't take you as seriously as a tall person, he told Insider. And this is another thing where I work at. There's 2 assistant managers, there's myself, and there's the short person I was talking about. If people, when they go into a place, they're inclined
And
to...
he's a manager as well, isn't he?
Yes, there's 2 assistant managers. There's me and him.
Okay, got it.
And when people go into a place, they're inclined to find the male in charge. When I worked at Radio Shack, I saw this extensively. And we had a female general manager, and no one ever went to her with their questions. Right. Well, it was just a thing that people did when they go into a store and they want to ask a question. They find the man in charge.
Right.
And it was like, well, let me ask our boss, and then you go ask a girl, and you can watch them have a little blue screen of death temporarily. Yeah. But this person that I work with, he's short, and people never go to him, and it's because he.
No, I said I wanted the manager.
Right.
Oh my god.
And I can only imagine how that affects someone through their whole life, right?
I think being short as a man is definitely a lot worse in society than being short as a woman, but it happens to me all the time. I get constantly talked to like I'm a little kid. Actually, at the post office, the lady said, "What can I do for you, kiddo?"
Oh my god. You're in your mid-20s.
I know, it's crazy. And like the other day I went to return something, and it's not like she said kiddo, but it's just a certain way people talk to me sometimes that I'm just like, they act like they're like being nice to a little kid.
Oh, your mom let you have the credit card? Oh, that's so cute.
And like I'm just gonna start talking to them like I think they're so old they probably should be in home, and I hope that they're are you driving yourself home? That's what I'm saying.
Oh my god, please do. That's awesome. Are you driving yourself home today? I love that example. That's fantastic. But I think it speaks a lot that the people who come into this place, they're more willing to engage with a trans person than they are a short person, right? If you give them the option between the two of us being in charge, you got the tall tranny and the short cis
with
dude.
the red hair,
yeah,
bright red hair,
and they tend to go to me instead.
Yeah,
very curious. It says something about people. I don't know what it says, but you're welcome to think about it. So this guy, Ibrahim, said if you're shorter, people don't take you as seriously as they do a tall person. He said he felt he wasn't confident enough to help students at his school. I strongly believe that charisma is one of the must-have features in leadership. When you're short, you start 1-0 down.
Did it say he was a high school guidance counselor? I know they said guidance counselor.
They didn't specify what age, I don't think.
Because there's a
it
good
just says
chance,
school counselor.
Yeah, if he's a high school counselor, most of the students are probably taller than him.
Probably, but if you're seated behind a desk, that's less obvious, and that's
okay,
probably
but you're going to walk around the halls at some point.
Fair point. So Abraham, who this article has helpfully used his weird last. No offense to the guy, he's Turkish. They've used his weird last name throughout all of this instead of just calling him Abraham. So
that's how they do it.
Abraham said his colleagues made jokes about his height at least once a week. And again, this happens with my short coworker. He makes the jokes more often than not, but it's just
that's
like
a
fat
coping
person.
mechanism.
Yeah.
It's a fat person making fun of the fact that they're fat. It's absolutely. He said he felt tall people around him were more popular and had more opportunities. They were more advantageous in both private relationships and recruitment. He said he'd never forgotten his first girlfriend telling him that she wished he was taller.
Oh,
that's really sad. Yeah, when I read that, I was like, that's literally so sad.
But it probably happens all the time, right? And it is one of those screwed up double standards where a girl can say to a guy, you're too short, but he can't say to her, that's okay, you're too fat.
Yeah.
Well, you could.
I think they should be able to. Yes, but oh my God, then you're fat shaming.
Well, whatever.
I agree, but to that type of person, you're not allowed to do that. You can turn someone down all day long for being short, but because they're trans or because they're fat, no.
Well, that's the thing. Well, most people, you can do something about your weight, right? You can't,
right.
Unless you want to cut your body open like this guy apparently did, there's really not much you can do about your height. And some people have said that people who have been fat and are no longer have looked back and actually thanked the people that gave them a hard time because it actually, in some cases, woke them up and made them feel like they needed to do something about it. I'm not saying I support being mean to people, but if you are a friend or somebody who cares about a person, maybe it's not a bad thing to bring it to their attention. Like, maybe they've let themselves go too long and they just need someone to say, hey, what are you doing to yourself?
I mean, in general, it's unhealthy to be overweight.
It absolutely
is. That's why it's overweight.
Yeah, there's this ridiculous propaganda that's going on now to try to pretend like being fat is healthy, and it's ridiculous.
No, being healthy is healthy, right? I understand that most Americans are too skinny, right? But the ancient Greeks said they were fuller.
Wait. Did you say most Americans are too skinny?
Okay.
Have you looked around?
Okay, yes. No, most Americans are too fat. Okay.
Yeah.
Americans idolize the people who go too far the other direction and who are too skinny. That's what I meant to say. Whereas it's okay to have a little meat on your bones.
Sure.
But to the average American, no. If you're not a supermodel with a thigh gap and all these other things and you weigh 12 pounds, like a 12 pounds, then you're overweight. That's
those
how
people
the
aren't
average.
even real anyway. They're
Right.
all, photoshopped.
Yeah.
Back in the old days, they were airbrushed.
But I remember when I was like in my early 20s reading an article about Keira Knightley, who was in the Pirates of the Caribbean movies. Who she was remarking about how she was told by her agent that she wouldn't be able to get the role because she was overweight.
Whoa.
Wow.
Keira Knightley, who was 120 pounds at the most, soaking wet. It's just insane how people take things in the other direction.
Even if she's like heavier than that, she's, at least during because I only seen her in Pirates of the Caribbean, she's like proportional and nice looking. She's not fat at all.
Yeah, she's absolutely gorgeous. Anyway, so Abraham researched methods that claimed to help a person grow taller. He took powders and pills to increase his height. He played basketball, swam, and jumped. And we've all been there when you don't like something about your party, when you don't like something about yourself, right? As a trans person, I've been there. I was like, okay, this will feminize my face. Let's take it. And it doesn't do anything, or insert whatever cure it's supposed to have, and it does nothing. No. I used to hang from a bar minutes before going to sleep almost every night.
Man.
I used reflexological insoles that claimed to stimulate height increase. So, I mean, he wore the little magnetic bracelets, right? That was supposed to help heal him or whatever. Nothing worked, obviously, except for shoes with hidden heels that made him up to 3 inches taller.
Okay.
But they weren't enough. It was like a false dream. Every time I took off shoes, I was facing reality again. My obsession was getting bigger every day. And I think it's fascinating how much self-awareness he has about this issue. He knows that his obsession with height was an obsession.
Yeah.
And it was unhealthy. And it was driving him to do unhealthy, desperate things.
Right.
Yeah, like people who just think they're ugly and put like way too much makeup on to where it's just like basically like a mask. I think that a lot of the times they, just keep doing it because they want to cover their face up. And maybe one day somebody, I don't know, they just need confidence to be told like, oh, you look good naturally in some way, but they don't see it basically. But this guy saw what he was doing when he took his shoes off.
So after 2 rounds of leg lengthening surgery, Abraham added 5 inches to his height. Was that at me with the makeup thing?
No.
I do wear a lot of makeup. So Abraham,
is it going to tell us how they do this?
I hope not. But I'm curious about it, right? Because where do you add 5 inches to someone's height, right?
I mean, are we grafting bone in or something like that?
What do you do about the muscle
It
and the
explains
tendons?
it, and it's crazy.
Because, I mean, you can't just add 5 inches of bone because then the muscle doesn't reach. So he didn't tell anyone about his first operation in February 2015, thinking they wouldn't understand. He's right. Most people wouldn't understand. Most people don't have these sort of severe issues with their body. And if they do, they're just, I can just deal with it.
And he said there was 2 operations? Okay.
Each of them made him about 2.5 inches taller, as it turns out. It made him 2.4 inches taller. When people noticed, he said that he had a bone deformity and needed surgery to rectify it. He had a second operation in March of 2020 that added another 2.4 inches to his height. A 2020 review of outcomes of cosmetic limb lengthening surgery found the most common complications were deformation of the newly generated bone after treatment had ended. So are they using some sort of stem cell technology to grow a person, a lengthened bone or a bone graft?
So that's a good guess, but it's weirder than that.
It's weirder than that?
Yeah. I think so.
And it's in this story?
It's in the article.
Okay.
All right.
Okay, because I hadn't gotten that part into it. I just read this, and like the gist of it's fascinating, of someone who he knows how unhealthy his obsession was, and yet he goes on to found his own Turkey-based clinic that offers leg lengthening surgery. So instead of being a counselor or a therapist like he's trained to do and help people work out these issues, he's like, hey, pay some money and make it go away. Don't fix your unhealthy obsession with therapy and introspection and making different life choices and learning to deal with it. Just pay this $25,000 to have this unhealthy, dangerous surgery.
The most unfair.
You're making that number up, right?
No, it's about $25,000.
$25,000 for this?
Yeah, it was like $24,000, something like that. I have to scroll all the makeup. In which case, $26,850.
I was just saying the most unfair thing about this whole situation with this guy is this type of thing probably happened to him from malnutrition as a child, because it's like people are, supposed to be a little bit taller than that, and it most likely happened as malnutrition as a child. Last night when I read this article, I just remembered he was from Turkey, whatever, didn't think about it again. And today when I was listening to this book I've been listening to called Deep Nutrition, I'm not saying that this guy was part of that, but she told a story about a group of people in Turkey that were being studied because the mothers were all having kids with that were super short, like a rare new form of dwarfism. And it turned out because they used to make really nutritious foods in that region, and then grocery stores and stuff like that came about with cheap, crappy foods that had no nutrition, and all of the kids were missing, and mothers were missing some really important, I don't remember which ones, but really important vitamins. And it's just you can't just be 25 and be like, oh, now I know that, so I'm going to start taking vitamins, and it's because you're done growing at that point. It's really unfair.
I want to go to the phones here. We have Neil on the line in Arizona. Neil, you're on Free Talk Live. Go ahead.
Hey, you guys remember me. You want to know how they made him taller?
Yes.
You know what the surgery is? Have you ever seen somebody that has broken their leg and they have around their leg, it's called an external fixator. It's like round pieces of steel with screws that are going in to hold the bones.
Yep.
Okay. They do something like that. They put that on your leg. They break your leg. And as the bones start to grow together, they slowly extend that, make it longer, and kind of tease the bones to keep growing, and it makes them longer, and then they let them grow together.
That's right. It says in the article, explains it in more detail, but basically instead of a kind of like a turnkey on the back of a wind-up doll, instead of that, there's a button that would be given to the patient. So the guy, Abraham, goes home with this button, and once or however many times a day, he presses the button, and it does its thing, moves the bones apart. Yeah, they break the bones, and then they're fusing back together.
You recoil. I'm like, yeah, that sounds about normal for surgery.
Yeah, but surgeries freak me out.
Wow.
I mean, thank you for the explanation. It's again, having had two surgeries, $26,000 is kind of a steal.
Okay, so just to be clear, this takes time, right? This isn't just you go under the knife and come out 2 inches taller. It's we break your leg, set you with this thing, and then you have to go through
months.
Months, yes.
He's in a wheelchair in some of these pictures. I mean, presumably he did regain the ability to walk, but it did at least partially take away his ability to walk.
That's amazing. Neil, what else did you want to share?
Hey, Aria, you're there, right?
He's here.
I believe so.
Aria, what are you doing on Sunday at about 3:06 California time?
AM or PM?
PM.
Fair question.
Okay.
I don't know. What is that, like noon our time?
No, it's 6 p.m. here.
6:06.
In which case, I believe I'd be at work. Why?
Because I wanted you to call into the radio station that I listen on and talk to one of the guys that's on live there on K-Talks on Sundays at that time.
What's the show?
Rob Hansen. Rob Hansen is called, the Rob Hansen radio program, he calls it. And he's a transgender.
Okay. I feel like you've told us about him before. Or somebody has.
Yeah, someone told us about a popular radio host somewhere in, I want to say it was New Mexico, though. And
K-Talks is in Arizona.
Okay.
No, actually he's in Needles, California is where
technically,
KTOX
that's where the
located.
station is, yeah.
If you want to shoot me an email at aria@freetalklive.com, that's the best way, because I'm going to forget everything about tonight's show as soon as I leave here tonight. But if you can email me at aria@freetalklive.com, that'll remind me, and I may not be able to do it this Sunday, but I can certainly schedule out the time for me to call and talk to this guy.
But what kind of thing did you want Aria to talk to him about?
Transgenderness.
No.
Okay. Not my favorite topic, but sure.
If I can get to some place where I can get a internet, currently I don't have internet at home, and I don't even have it on my phone. So,
all right. Well, I made a note here for Aria in case she wants to do that.
And the call-in number, if you do remember, is 855-586-9134.
Ian's writing that down. So Ian's making a note, and I will add it to my
Neil.
calendar for a few weeks from now so that I can, stay listening to the show, and I will let you know when I've scheduled out a time for me to call this guy and hopefully talk to him. Or I think I'll email him first and try to set something up.
Thank you, Neil, for the call tonight. I appreciate it. We got time for you. If you want to join us here, the number is 603-283-6160. You can bring up absolutely anything you want. A little bit more on this leg lengthening thing that's going on, and sounds pretty intense. There's more coming up. This is Free Talk Live. On Free Talk Live, we're bringing people to the ideas of liberty every day. From wrestling superstars like Glenn Jacobs.
You guys really are having an impact, I believe. Like I said, a lot of where I am now is due to listening to Free Talk Live. You changed my mind on some very important issues years ago.
To random people tuning in on the radio.
I was kind of stuck in the left-right paradigm. I heard your show by chance on a Saturday night. From there, I went on, joined the Free State Project, and become an amplifier. So, that's really the reason why I amp is because I know that if it wasn't for you guys being on as many stations as you are, I never would have found the ideas of liberty.
You can help more people hear the message of liberty by joining Free Talk Live's AMPS program on Patreon for as little as $5 a month. And you'll get access to special perks. Visit amps.freetalklive.com, amps.freetalklive.com.
From Feature Story News in Washington, I'm Simon Marks. The leaders of the US, Mexico and Canada have roundly condemned the weekend's uprising in Brazil that saw supporters of former President Jair Bolsonaro occupy and vandalize government buildings in the capital, Brasilia. At least 1,200 people have been detained by the authorities. US National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan is traveling with President Biden in Mexico City.
There is absolutely no doubt about where President Biden of the United States stands on this assault on democracy, democratic institutions, and the peaceful transfer of power. The United States speaks clearly with one voice on this issue.
Mr. Bolsonaro, meanwhile, has been admitted to a hospital in Florida suffering from abdominal pain amid reports that he has taken advice in recent days from figures within former President Donald Trump's inner circle. Correspondent Ewan Marshall is in Sao Paulo.
He did speak up last night after the storming of Congress, suggesting that these kind of violent riots is not what he wants. He was kind of comparing them to left-wing protests, which never actually could be compared with the extent of the damage that was committed last night.
The British government is block booking beds at the country's care homes in a bid to free up space in hospitals after NHS workers announced their planned industrial action is going ahead. Talks with the government ended on Monday without agreement. Sarah Gorton is with the Labour union Unite.
There was acknowledgement that there is an understanding from the Secretary of State of the trade union's position that resolution to the dispute is entirely possible on our side, but needs a firm commitment to boosting pay for this year, as well as a commitment to talks for the following pay year.
Meanwhile, 7,000 nurses in New York have taken to picket lines demanding higher pay and increased staff capacity. 2 major hospitals in New York City are affected. Russia and Ukraine are to discuss the possibility of prisoner exchanges when their respective human rights commissioners meet in Turkey. A Ukrainian news agency says Kyiv is expecting, quote, the return of our heroes and heroines. From FSN's bureau in Moscow, where he operates within the Kremlin's reporting restrictions, Stuart Smith with more.
Prisoner exchanges have happened before, most recently on Sunday. They usually include tens or hundreds of troops, usually one Russian for one Ukrainian. This meeting will be a rare example of direct communication between both countries, which may signal a bigger exchange is being looked into, or that the way they take place is up for discussion. Moscow's Human Rights Commissioner also commented on Monday about Russia's use of criminals to fight in Ukraine. She said that their release was all in accordance with the law, but is a state secret, meaning the details of the arrangement cannot be released. The first group of prisoners recruited to fight in Ukraine are now free in Russia, having completed their 6-month contract and with all criminal records cleared.
From bureaus worldwide, this is FSN.
Our Matrix server is about as free as internet chat can be. Join the existing rooms or create your own at chat.freetalklive.com.
It's Free Talk Live. The phones are open, and you can join us here. The number is 603-283-6160. That's 603-283-6160. Do want to say thank you to Jack, who is a Free Talk Live supporter of our AMPS program. You can go to amps.freetalklive.com, and you can help support what we do here on Free Talk Live. It's a way to directly support our mission to spread the ideas of peace and liberty and freedom and good economics, that sort of thing, all across the United States and beyond to the internet as well. We got about 170 plus great radio stations that air the show at various different times throughout the week. We can have more than that, and people like Jack make that possible. So thank you, Jack, for doing that over at amps.freetalklive.com. That's where you can sign up. It's our Patreon. You can use your debit card, credit card, your PayPal account. You get some perks like access to the AMP Only podcast that has the full radio show without recorded commercials. And there are some other bennies that you'll get as well. So head on over to amps.freetalklive.com. Here tonight, it's Ian.
It's Bonnie.
And Arya.
Of course, we're in our third hour. That means everybody decides it's time to call in to this open phone show. So
Naturally.
We're going to go back to it. But if we get the chance, we'll dig further into this story about the leg lengthening surgery, which is a shocker, but apparently it's a thing. We go first to Bob. He's in West Virginia. Bob, you're on Free Talk Live.
Hey there. Listen, I'm sure a lot of folks haven't heard yet that day before yesterday, President Biden had come out with his recent executive order directing the Treasury Department, the Commerce Department, and other departments in his administration to draw up plans on how to move the United States into a cashless society, which means that you would no longer be carrying cash. You'd have a digitized card, and the Federal Reserve would load your card for you, and you would transfer all of your funding to those who work. Let's say the kid next door mows your lawn. You're supposed to transfer some of that money to his account, and that's the way you do business. Now in China, they're saying this is a great idea. You keep hearing about how the Chinese model is the best. Well, in China, they have social scores. That's how much money you get or how much currency you get put into your account by what books you read, what you buy, how long you spend playing video games, and all these other partisan requirements for getting a good social score or a poor social score. There is an electrical engineer in China. He cannot even take a flight on an airplane because he has criticized the government on various points.
Right. This is all more reason that people shouldn't, like these digital currencies, because without the digital, that's what it's shaping up to be. It's a mark of the beast sort of thing, where if you have a digital wallet with the Federal Reserve or the U.S. government or whatever, and they don't like what you say, they just turn off your ability to use money. Facebook Pay has something very similar, and they wanted something even worse, where if they weren't happy about what you said on Facebook, bam, there you go. No more being able to send or receive money on Facebook. Similar things with PayPal, right. Cash App, and other competitors to that. The issue is that we already have... Yeah, we already have a dollar that is like 98, 99% digital at this point. We already have a digital currency, man.
Well, 61% of all of our petty arrangements for purchasing stuff is done with cash, but that'll all disappear. You see, once we get rid of cash in your wallet, you're going to have to go through the government to buy and sell things.
Yeah, we already do. I work at a pizza place, man.
Exactly correct.
And on an average Friday, we do like $14,000 in sales, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And
what percentage cash?
Yeah, usually I have a deposit to make of about $300.
Wow.
Yeah, so we're not even like 1% cash at this point.
Yeah, Bob, this is something we've been talking about. Sorry, Bob, we just want to let you know. We've been talking about the so-called central bank digital currency now for a couple of years here on Free Talk Live. Now, when did you say this executive order came into play?
This was 2 days ago.
2 days ago? And, where did you hear it?
He basically ordered the various agencies of government to draw up a plan on how to squire in this new cashless society.
Are you sure
and
you're
how
not
to
talking
make
about
it
the one
happen,
from
basically.
earlier in 2022? Because there was a lot of
No,
hubbub
this
over
is one
that.
from day before yesterday.
Where did you catch wind of this one?
This was I was surfing the net over at the library
Mm-hmm.
in Charleston, and I came across it. It was right
Do you,
there.
you don't happen to have the
And,
number handy, do you?
The number of what?
The executive order.
No, I don't. I was just
Okay.
skimming. I was doing some business, basically.
Maybe you could just pull
And
up like
I was-
most recent executive orders or something.
Yeah, I mean, it's just because when I looked it up,
is
I
most
found
recent.
I found examples from an example from earlier in 2022 where there's
Right.
actually a lot of mainstream media quote unquote debunking of. Like AP, for instance, has a whole article here about, oh, no, this order's not about bringing in a cashless society. You know, fake news. This isn't about that. When, of course, it
No,
absolutely is a
it
step
is-
in that
it's
direction.
very plain and exact. They really do wish to squire in a cashless society. That's
But they've
what
already
it's all
done
about.
it, though.
They've been working on that for a long time, for sure.
Well, I'm saying absolute cashless. That's more or
Well,
less.
it'll never be truly successful because things like cryptocurrency already exist, and they provide an out from that system.
But it's not quote unquote cash, right? That's still another digital
Well-
currency. There's going to be people who still want to have something in their hands.
Sure.
And of course, you can't get rid of the gold back either. That's another alternative that you can physically keep and that you can physically hand to people. I'll take a look for this one
It
here.
looks like there hasn't been one in
Please do.
2023. According to
I'm going to send you both white papers.
Okay, feel free. I did give you my email address on that one, but I think that you're absolutely right, Bob. This is definitely some. Whether or not there was an order within the last 2 days, Bonnie says there hasn't been one yet this year. It's probably. I'm guessing what you probably saw was a report written about the thing that came out in 2022, which a lot of people were proclaiming was about moving towards a cashless society. And I think you're right. I think that it absolutely is. They are trying to do that. That is what one of their goals is with the central bank digital currency, which they are currently developing. Now, they haven't yet put that into play. It's not a done deal. They're still trying to figure out how best to screw the American people and keep the banks on top of everything. So
Well, they
haven't-
also have to figure out the money laundering problem too, because like they still have to have a way to get drugs
That's what they say.
to get money to the drug dealers in Colombia to buy weapons and stuff like that.
Right. Plus, the politicians still need a way to get paid off.
Right.
So they got to figure out. They got details to figure out. But Bob, thanks for the call tonight, and thanks for the heads up on the problems down there in West Virginia. We got a radio station with some dead air.
Absolutely.
Thanks for the heads up, man. I appreciate it. That's Bob there in West Virginia.
And you know, Canada doesn't have a CBDC yet or a completely cashless society yet, but they were turning off people's bank accounts for you know, just protesting against them
Right.
last year.
Yeah,
PayPal wanted to
ago.
do something similar recently. I think they dialed it back a little bit due to pushback, but central bank digital currencies, they're certainly scary. I'm not a Christian unless you subscribe to the notion that Satanism is a denomination of Christianity, and I sort of I'm not going to argue with you if you take that position. Anyway, I'm not a Christian, but this central bank digital currency thing, it has every facet to it that you would expect the mark of the beast,
Sure
as
does.
mentioned in the book of Revelation, to have. It's a method of control. It's a way. If you don't have the mark, you can't buy or sell or work.
Yeah, I mean, look, you can at least see this coming, right? Like, there's been decades where it's been talked about. Alex Jones, for instance, 20 years ago was talking about this. They for last 20 years as well. I remember Alex Jones talking about implants, right? Like the chip. Everybody's going to have the chip, that kind of thing. We don't have that yet, but the technology is here. It's just not. They are not forcing it on people just yet, because right now it's good enough that everybody has a phone in their pocket, and that's essentially good enough.
And they did facial recognition.
But how far are we from, okay, we can just have your crypto wallet implanted in a chip on the back of your hand, then you don't have to scan any QR codes or any of that.
It's here. The tech's here. I mean, it can be done. There are people who have done those things, but it's all been done on a voluntary basis so far. And that's how they're going to roll out the CBDC, is it's going to appear to be a voluntary thing. They're going to convince people to accept this. They're not going to hold you down and shove the CBDC wallet onto your phone. They're going to give you a welfare payment.
Well,
They're
people
gonna say-
love convenience. They could just be like, it's like Apple Pay, but you just use your hand.
Sure, and that may come around eventually, but that's not where they're going to start it. They're going to say, look, here's a welfare payment. Oh, you guys remember when we gave you that $1,400 check during COVID? Well, now we're going to give you a $2,000 check. That's right. Of course, $2,000 won't buy what, $300 did at the time, a few years ago. But regardless, they'll still, they'll come up with some arbitrary number, and they'll give it away. And they'll say, look, we just want you to sign up. You're going to need this app if you ever want to receive a payment from Social Security, if you ever want to receive your tax refund, and we just want to get you started on this. Come on board. You'll get your $2,000 one-time payment from the federal government. Or hell, maybe they'll even be doing a UBI by that point. And then it's like, hey, if you want to get in this UBI, this universal basic income here, $500 a month.
That's how they'll sell
money.
it.
Yeah, all you got to do is sign up for this government app, this Federal Reserve app. And so that's what it's going to be. It's going to be for the government payments first and foremost. Then they're probably going to get the corporations, the big corporations, Walmarts, etc., on board to accept it as payment.
Yep.
And
Amazon would be a key player. If they get Amazon to take it, almost every American would be willing to do it.
And then you'll be able to use this app to receive your paychecks eventually from these same big corporations that are willing to accept it as payments. Will also be asked or told that they'll have to pay their people in this. And so then the whole of corporate America will be completely taken in amongst this particular app. You'll then only have the unbanked and the crypto hardcores and the people who are like the outlaw types that won't want to have anything to do with this. It's going to be...
And the
That's my
Christians.
prediction.
The Christians will hold the line on this one for a very long time.
You think so?
Well, I think they'll want to. But I think that
I don't
as
think
we
they
learned...
got a principled bone in their body. Look at COVID.
Yeah, I think as we learned from watching COVID-19, that if the Antichrist comes along and says, hey, we're going to keep you safe, love us, embrace us, worship us, these Christians will be on their knees in a heartbeat saying thank you.
I think we learned that from Trump because, my parents completely believe God wants us to vote for Trump, and it doesn't matter what bad things come out about him. And the more he, the more the people promoting him, at least, sounded like false prophets, and everyone will be tricked. It didn't matter. They were like, "Oh God, what the person on God TV told me to vote for Trump. I will vote for Trump." Are they still
on the Trump train after 4 years and all the broken promises?
My parents?
Yeah.
Yeah, they think that he is,
wow.
He's not perfect, but.
See, it was COVID-19 and my grandmother and the vaccine for me because, watching my grandmother get the vaccine, and this was at a time when the vaccine passports was coming out and all of this, and, you and my uncle, both of whom are hardcore, you got to get the vaccine and be safe, blah, 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 blah. My whole life, they had actual bunkers set up that they were terrorizing us when we were kids, saying, hey, look, the Antichrist is going to take over. He's coming. This is going to happen. We've got these bunkers here. We're stockpiling them with ammunition and food because one day you're going to be patrolling these streets out in 1999. You're going to be patrolling around our house. And if you hear anything, don't ask questions. Just turn and shoot. I'm 10 years old. They brainwashed us with this nonsense. And 20 years later, they're bending over for the beast. Like, yes, please, can I have your mark, sir?
That's crazy. That's
Wow.
really crazy.
Let's go to the phones here. We got Sarah on the line in New Mexico. Sarah, you're on Free Talk Live.
Oh, I just wanted to mention that they stopped talking about building that lake when they remodeled that mall. So they finally...
What the hell are you talking about, Sarah?
She called
a Riverwalk
previously.
type, San Antonio Riverwalk thing?
Yeah. They were talking. It's like some big government building project where
they're
they were
trying to
build
copy
some
San
kind of-
Antonio.
build some kind of mall.
No, it's not. We don't have a river to make like that. It's
So they're going to build a lake.
Malls that was failing. So they wanted to build a bar over a lake, man-made lake.
Yeah.
Up towards 5 miles up from where
The San
the
Antonio
river
one is man-made too.
Okay.
So the thing is, it's ridiculous, and I think they put a stop to it because this is the.
I thought you were a
desert,
fan of this idea. I thought the last time you called in, you were saying this was going to be a big deal for Albuquerque and that it was going to help the economy. And now you're saying you think it's a good idea to stop it?
Well, here's the thing. I thought this was a really good idea. I was sold on it on the news, and then what happened was I talked to one of the store owners that lived here for many, many generations, born and raised here in New Mexico. And then he brought up their how selfish they are, just hoarding all the water like this. And obviously these people, developers are from out of state, like Minneapolis, Land O'Lakes, or something like that, where they have the education to build a mall, but they're not. They don't.
Yeah, you
they're
don't
not
have that
native.
education down there in New Mexico, huh? People can't build things. You got to have the out of towners come in from Minneapolis.
Well, of course.
I just thought you leftists. I just thought you leftists opposed climate change. What else would you call this? You're building a man-made lake?
Well, she's now opposed to it.
Oh,
she talked to
Right,
somebody who
because
didn't like it, so she changed her mind.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm talking about the native people that's been here for generations. How the water is so scarce that we just have zero-scape landscaping. People go out of their way to save water, and this is like being hoardish. But again, like you said, Ian, there are no educated developers that can develop proper buildings here, by the way. You are correct.
Well, why the hell are you still there, Sarah?
I don't see how that's possible.
Is it legal in New Mexico to collect rainwater?
Well, I mean, that's a big thing, is that we've been collecting rainwater. And I'm kind of thinking, like, why are these people doing this? And it dawned on me because of the water scarcity. And you know something?
You had to ponder why people who lived in the desert were collecting rainwater, Sarah? Like, this wasn't immediately obvious to you?
No, I mean, no. It took me a while for me to Dan out. Why are these these bowls with this whole bath? What are these people doing here? Like,
Well, Sarah gets her bottled water from her welfare check, so she doesn't have to do that.
Maybe they're just so uneducated they don't even know they can leave. You know, it's like Pleasantville or something. They think this is the only place on Earth.
Oh my gosh.
Well, I mean, they do certain things well here in New Mexico. I do have to give credit about the environmental stuff, but when it comes to planning and designing, like running like a business construction, they're not that great. In fact, when an Oregon company wanted to build a call center, they wanted to hire their construction people from Oregon. And then they said, no, you're going to hire our New Mexico construction people.
Okay,
So they
Sarah,
have
what
to
do they do
use
well
that
there? You
factory.
said they do things well there in New Mexico. Like, give me an example. What is New Mexico good at?
Drag races.
Okay, we're very, very environmental. We're very, we're very good with the air, clean energy. We came in third for the cleanest or uncontaminated soil.
Would you describe building a man-made lake as being good for the environment?
Well, no, they put a stop to it.
right.
People put a stop to it. People that are from here, because they stopped talking about it. So then
yeah.
they have to have
I
some
understand.
kind of other attraction. And they're very good with the green chili, by the way. And then
The green what now?
they're
Chili.
experts in roasting
Green
and growing
chili.
green chili.
Okay.
And the people want in Europe that want to buy our green chili.
Okay,
You
good to know.
know,
Well, that may
green
be a
chili.
reason to take that other turn to Albuquerque and stop by and have some green chili. Thanks for the call
Well,
tonight,
Ian,
Sarah.
you know,
Appreciate it.
your comment about Pleasantville, it's just true of people, a lot of people, not everyone, in small towns. They just act
don't
like
leave.
this is the only part, or this is the only
That's
place
true.
I could live for whatever reason. And they talk, when you hear them talk, sometimes you're just like, whoa, you really don't know anything about just like the places, the states around you. No, I'm not talking about the world. It's not like I'm some super worldly person like, ha ha ha, you small. But it's just like you don't know anything. Like there was this girl on the small military base I lived on in Utah who said, I just realized one day that in Utah, lots of people are Mormons, but outside of Utah, it's probably only like 20% of people are Mormons.
Not even, right?
No, like
Yeah.
way less than that.
There may be 20 total Mormons in the state of New Hampshire.
Let's
Right.
go to the phones here. We got David, also in New Mexico. David, you're on Free Talk Live.
Yeah, there's probably as low a percentage of Mormons as there are Jews, like 2.4%. And build it, and they will come. Sounds like an ad for a sex toy. Did you see me in a Kevin Costner movie?
What?
In a movie with Kevin Costner.
Which movie?
Swing Vote. Didn't you see me?
Swing Vote?
Yeah.
No, I don't know. I've never
No,
heard of
it's
it.
not a
Wasn't he
sexual
also in,
reference.
I can't think of the
Does
name.
he still make
Waterworld?
movies? Yeah, he was. Does he still make movies after Waterworld?
I don't think
He's
anyone
doing
involved with
Yellowstone.
Waterworld ever recovered,
I was
did
going to
they?
say, didn't that sink his
He's doing
career?
Yellowstone. He's doing Yellowstone now.
Okay, all right.
I too like to sue random federally owned parks. Did you say he's suing Yellowstone?
I think he said he's doing.
Oh.
Okay.
Doing. That's not a sexual reference either.
No, I would be surprised if it was.
Why am I the only one that laughed at David's sex jokes?
I was
shocked,
and I wanted to move on from it.
It's probably apparently it's a TV series. So Yellowstone is a multi-season TV series.
Yeah.
Okay.
And Sarah's actually correct. You could easily make a San Antonio and Albuquerque because you got the Rio Grande, which actually has more cubic feet of flow than the San Antonio River does by about 4 times on average. And it's all on the level, so you could run that river wherever you wanted to, all around downtown. And the fact that if they wanted to store. Oh, by the way, right here, if I go kick this barrel, that's just a couple barrels. I got the 2,000 gallons of rainwater stored from here in the desert. I live off of rainwater. I don't haul any water. All of my water comes from the rain. I got 2,000 gallons right here. I could have 20,000 gallons if I had the container to put it in.
But don't you think if they did do a San Antonio-style riverwalk in Albuquerque, ultimately it would be better for the poor people because it would bring attractions and jobs and stuff like that? Because people love the riverwalk in San Antonio.
Yeah, it would be very cool. Then they should do it, and it would do all good things. Yes, and it's not a waste of water either because if you look at all of New Mexico's water is already stored in man-made lakes. All of their water is already stored in man-made lakes. I mean, all the surface water, not counting the water people who have wells.
Mm-hmm.
But and so, what is one more man-made lake? It's nothing. All of the water the Rio Grande, all of that water that they would be using to do their river walk and a man-made lake, all of that water, if they don't use it in Albuquerque to make a man-made lake there, it just goes downstream about 80 miles to Elephant Butte Reservoir, and it sits in a man-made lake in Elephant Butte Reservoir until they let it go out of there and it goes to Texas.
David, thanks for calling tonight with the update on the lake project.
I'm
Appreciate
glad
it.
he had more info for us than just Sarah because I have many questions still.
By the way, apparently Kevin Costner has had a career. I haven't heard of really any of these movies, but he has been in quite a few. Well, I guess he's been in Batman versus Superman. That's one I've heard of. Never seen it, but
I actually saw that one. That's like one superhero movie I saw. My dad wanted to watch it.
Well, I mean, what is an unsuccessful Hollywood actor? Someone who only makes $300,000 a movie or something? I mean, like,
I don't know.
One movie every 3 or 4 years, and he's set for life anyway.
Bills.
So,
Yeah,
I
that's
mean,
for sure. He's getting the bills paid. He's had a bunch of them.
He could probably have retired after Field of Dreams and probably have just been just fine if he didn't have a coke habit. I don't know if he's got a coke habit or not. I'm not saying he does, but if he doesn't have a coke habit or something like that, then Field of Dreams probably has him set for life anyway.
Yeah, he hasn't hit 70 yet. He's in his late 60s, and apparently he starred in a short film called Field of Dreams 2. So there's a sequel to Field of Dreams. Came out in 2011, according to IMDb.
See, because now I'm curious about the original Field of Dreams. Was it really, as I remember it, was just some dude with a farm who was like, I'm going to play baseball with ghosts, basically? Because that's what I remember about it. It's like, first of all, who makes a movie about that? And if they do, why is it successful? Right? So now I want to go back and watch Field of Dreams just to see if 4-year-old me had it right. And it's just this dude hanging out watching ghosts play baseball, which that's a weird plot for a movie, man.
Baseball movies are just terrible, but that sounds really terrible.
Well, I mean, you still haven't seen the new Avatar yet.
I have not.
And I do have an article about the new Avatar. Just, it's something we haven't gotten to yet. It hasn't been as important as fireworks, spans, and that sort of thing.
And I'm not likely to watch the new Avatar anytime soon, unfortunately.
All right. Well, we may have to talk about it.
3.5 hours,
We
right?
may have to talk about it anyway, because I think you'll still be able to comment on it. You don't have to see the movie in order to comment on it.
Is there a Cliff Notes or can I watch a YouTube review for like 10 minutes that will fill me in?
Ian played a YouTube review of these guys I usually think are pretty good, and I wanted nothing to do with the movie after listening to theirs. But when I watched the movie, I was like, wow, this is actually great. Like, it kept my attention the whole time.
I'll watch the cinema sins of it.
All right. You'll have to tell me what that is in a little bit. We'll see you tomorrow night online. In the meantime, you can join us at freetalklive.com. The Free State Project has reached its goal of 20,000 liberty lovers who've pledged to move to New Hampshire and get active to achieve liberty in our lifetime. Perhaps you're trying to figure out what part of New Hampshire should be your destination. If so, consider Keene. You'll find more than 150 reasons to move to Keene at move.freekeene.com. Keene is famous for its historic, publicity-generating activism, as well as being the liberty media capital of the world. It's home to freekeene.com, New Hampshire's destination for liberty activism, news, and opinion. For years, we've been compiling over 150 reasons to move to Keene at move.freekeene.com, where you'll learn about some of what's happening here and what makes Keene a great place to live. If you love liberty, you'll probably enjoy anywhere you end up in the Shire. But do your due diligence first. Please visit move.freekeene.com for the full list of over 150 reasons to move to Keene. That's move.freekeene.com.